Okay, fine. I'm going to stand up. It's a bit of a squeeze here. So anyway, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining. Thank you for squeezing in, and thank you for bearing with in terms of the technical details and what have you. Thank you for choosing this presentation. Hopefully, you'll find it useful and interesting. Before we dive into it, first of all, I need to start with a confession. And hopefully this is a safe space to have this particular confession. Right. So my name's Simon, and I'm an enterprise architect. And I have been for the last 27 years. Okay, I've got that out of the way. Yes, I know I don't look old enough. I started when I was 4. So that probably means I've been drawing boxes on PowerPoint slides for 27 years. And that probably sounds about right. Now, if I think back to my first enterprise architecture experience, and this was at British Gas in Staines. And let's face it, the world doesn't get more rock and roll than British Gas in Staines, particularly driving around the M25 to get there every day, back in the day when everybody drove or went to the office every day. If I think back to what I and we did there in the enterprise architecture world, we had, if my memory serves me correctly, and this has been a real sort of rewind sort of exercise, we had our application architecture in Casewise captured in that. We had standards and principles and the rest of it on the internet. We had a technical design authority, all of that good stuff. And if I think back to that 27 years ago and think, well, in the world since then, things have moved on. My mobile phone then looked a little bit different to what it does now. We didn't have cloud. We didn't have, well, there was AI, but it wasn't quite the same as it is now. Organizations were very different in terms of, since then there's offshoring, there's sort of move to agile with value streams and squads and tribes and release trains and lots of fancy terms like that. So lots of things have changed, but the practice of architecture maybe hasn't changed that much. You might think it has, but in some respects, I don't think it has. And in some ways, that's great because, hey, we're all still in jobs. We can all still kind of do what we're doing. But as architects, it is intrinsic in terms of what we do to constantly think about better, how we can innovate, how we can be more efficient and effective and such like. And that's kind of the backdrop to this conversation today. There we are. See if we can get this working. Okay, so in terms of today, yeah, my name's Simon Barrows. I'm Services Director at Icon Solutions. My co-speakers today are Dean Ogden here, who is Principal Architect, and Ewan Withers over there is one of our Heads of Architecture. They'll be doing the heavy lifting in the middle. I'm teeing it all up for them, and then I'll kind of sort of put a cherry on it at the end and all the rest of it, but they're doing the hard work. And we've also got interspersed, and this was the primary reason for doing the little bit jiggery poke in terms of laptops. We've got 3 kind of ask the audience Mentimeter sort of polls as we go through. So kind of get your phones ready if you're not already scrolling on TikTok. Okay, fine. Let's crack on. So a little bit about Icon Solutions, and it will be a little bit about why is that on there? We need to get rid of that. That's interesting. That's not on my screen down here. Oh, it's on this laptop, is it? Okay. How do I click off of that then? I'm scared to touch anything.
Yeah, don't touch it.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm not touching anything. Okay, Icon Solutions, very quickly, 200-person company based in Wimbledon, founded about 15 years ago. In terms of what we do, well, people love a Venn diagram. Probably most famous for what we do in payments these days, but for the purposes of today, what we do in terms of architecture and integration and data and IR sector is absolutely, I guess the focus of the activity there. Who we work with, a lot of large banks in particular, and we've actually got investment from several of them, Citi, NatWest and UBS, but also work outside of that. because I think, as you were saying kind of earlier, Chloe, good architecture is good architecture, whether HSBC or Bupa or BP or whatever. So there's that, and that's enough of that. So yeah, so going back to what I was saying at the start, the assertion here, and we can argue the toss over it either now or later, is that architecture and sort of the practice of doing architecture needs to evolve. And there's probably lots of reasons for that, and this is not meant to be an exhausted list, but certainly in terms of what we're seeing in our clients, there's an increasing pressure on architects to do more with less. We're seeing in some clients layers of architects being removed, architects and sort of lending into that second point, the sort of architect and engineering kind of, I guess, boundary being blurred, architects being expected to be expected to sort of be engineers, and engineers sort of expected to do architecture. There are metrics in some organizations that we're working with, we're looking at the technology departments and, saying, well, actually, we want 70% of the people in our IT department to be committing code. Obviously, that puts a squeeze on everyone else. And alluding to what I was saying earlier, a lot of what, the role we do as architects is still quite a manual process, in what is becoming an ever digital and automated world. And now we've got Gen AI and agentic AI, and I don't know what's going to be next year. So there's potential there that we, as architects, need to be not just looking at how those things can help our organizations, but how they can help ourselves as well. And if you want to know what's wrong with that picture that's on the right-hand side, ask Ewan later. So in terms of what we're covering today, so we cover a few things, some of the sort of less sexy stuff, sort of first in terms of why you need to codify and manage your architecture, get the data right, etc. We'll look in terms of what Dean's going to talk about with regard to, some real world kind of sort of use cases, because the aim of today is not to talk in vagaries and far from what have you, but it's to get into actual kind of real world experience from our own R&D within Icon, but also from what we're kind of seeing with clients, and have a look at I guess some of the experimentation in terms of how AI can start to help in terms of all of this. But as with any journey, as with any story, you need to start somewhere. And this very much is a story where you need to start with the data. So without any further waffle from me, we move on to our first audience question of the day. So if you've got a phone, scan the QR code. If you haven't got a phone, but a laptop, then if you go to menti.com and put in that access code, the 98849703, and get into the first audience question. Once you've done the first one, hopefully then it should follow through in terms of 2 and 3 more seamlessly, but we'll leave a little bit of time just for everybody to get that up and running for now. So in terms of the first question, what is the state of your architecture data? And I would encourage everybody to be honest. None of these responses are being recorded. And so we've got the usual sort of 5-point spectrum from your data is like the dark side of the moon. And yeah, no reference there to multi-million selling kind of albums, but maybe you can probably work out what that means in reality, all the way through to E. It's beautifully codified and referentially linked and continually reconciled with production telemetry. Which sounds marvelous, and it's also a bit of a mouthful. Start saying that after 3 whiskey. And things, sort of waypoints in between. So have a look at those answers and think, honestly, where are you right now in terms of the quality, the management, all the rest of it, of your architecture data? I'll give everybody a few seconds to do that, and then we'll flip on to the next slide.
The same everywhere in your data.
Sorry?
What if it's not the same?
Well, I will leave you to form your own view in terms of how you answer that question.
I'm not sure what you mean by architectural data. It's
Data about your architecture without sort of being too kind of sort of trite about it. Architecture that describes your enterprise in the context of your systems, your technology, the data itself and processes. Not
what's the definition of architecture? It's
all of that. Yeah. All of that. Okay. I'll move on. Hopefully everybody's either got the QR code and typed in now. So let's start seeing if this works in practice. Some results.
People are truthful.
Yeah. apart from the fact that no one's put like the dark side of the moon. So yeah, I think coming into this, my kind of, if I'd have sort of stuck a pin on the donkey type of thing, I'd have probably said somewhere between not 2 and 3, sort of B and C, probably with a bit more of an emphasis to B. So that's coming out about right. So you know it's there, but it's in different places, it's in different systems, it's not well strung together, it's not kind of coherently managed. And that, you know, is a challenge for us all ultimately. Okay, at this point, I'm going to shut up and hand over to you.
Thank you, Simon. As Simon says, I'm in as one of the heads of architecture practice at ICON, been there since 2010, good lord. And yes, the question you just asked about what do you mean by architecture data? Well, it is the architecture, it's the codification of what your architecture is. And this, I'm thinking about what Chloe was talking about earlier on. It spans your IT end to end. It's not just the bits in blue in the middle, which you can't really read, and that's fine. It's which would be, say, your logical applications. You've got your technology stat over in green. There's motivations for change. There's your delivery packages. There's your business processes. There's business risks. There's a whole bundle of things, all of which they describe what your architecture is. They describe why your architecture has to change, and they describe how it will change to some extent as well. And as was alluded to in that in the answer to the question there, these live in different data sets. The colouring on the diagram kind of alludes to that. They're isolated, they're disconnected in your organisations. Some of them will be in people's heads, some of them will be locked away in proprietary data sets. And they're isolated, they're disconnected, except they're not. They do influence each other. Having this end-to-end view is how we can sort of meaningfully do things with the architecture as we look at it and try to make some value happen. If you move, I'll just wave at you to do that.
Yeah, I'm here to serve.
I'm going to go through this quite quickly because Dean's got the real material. No pressure, Dean. Did you see the bus?
Yeah.
So if you want to start with codifying your architecture, where do you, because that is a big picture, and to be fair, it's utopian, and it's not a new thing either. Architecture as code has been talked about for a long time, certainly as long as I've been working in this kind of role. And in a way, apply architecture principles to architecture. Where do you start? Understand your current state. That all of those different sets of data, where are they? And what's the quality of them? Who owns them? Are they accessible? What's the location of them? To figure out if we're going to try and join these things together, what are we going to have to do it? And the other thing is, you've got, again, as Chloe was saying, architecture is a huge practice, a huge set of things that need to be done. Find some problems that are going to show value quickly, because architecture, if you're in the wrong organisation, can be viewed not just as an expensive waste of money, but an actual blockage on progress if you're not careful. So find something that you can genuinely show value with, show value to the organisation, where you can take a slice through that diagram and say we can link our technology data via our application data to our business capability data, and then genuinely make some meaningful conclusions from joining that data together. And a crucial thing at the end there is you're probably going to have an enterprise architecture tooling landscape. You're going to have some tools to work with, whether that be large enterprise scale software, or just the ability to go and hack around in data with a, don't do it in VB, please, but do it in a real programming language. Sorry. But the crucial thing there is understand what tool you're using, what its capability is for. Particularly for me, the storage and management of your architecture data should be separate from the way you visualize it. Separate the capabilities and apply architecture principles to your architecture.
Having done this, I just wondered if you're going to talk about meta models as well.
I think let's pick that one up. Let's pick that one up.
Because how easy is it to change them?
Yeah.
Well, yes.
One thing I was just going to say down,
Yeah,
because
because No.
Yeah.
No, it's fair enough.
Yeah, yeah.
But fair enough. Just that the diagram I drew there was I was a sad person I am over Christmas last year. Coming from the work that come out of the work I'd done in the previous year, and it drew. I realised it pulled together material from all across the landscape. It is meant to be generic, and you can change it as you see fit for your organisation. It's just trying to show that you've got a breadth of different data sets and you need to interconnect
Yeah.
them. But yeah, the meta model and if you've got an enterprise architecture practice currently, there can be intransigence in that as well, and you can lock yourself into caught on that.
The big problem I found, so nobody knew what to call anything.
Mm.
Any of this stuff.
Common terminology is critical.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely right. Everyone needs to talk the same
Yeah.
language, but pulling all this together, hopefully that will happen.
So,
Yeah.
can I just ask?
Mm.
When you're describing the data, you're describing the architectural modeling data, not the organizational data, right? Or the operational data, because if we start expanding, then, you know, you have regulatory pressures, you don't know how GDPR is going to be interpreted in the next
Yeah,
5 years,
absolutely right.
you do not know what additional considerations, so which data do you keep for how long and why? And how do you integrate all that
This-
together?
yeah.
That's one dimension. What's the prioritization coming from the business structures? That's a second dimension. And how are you gonna visualize all that? If you're talking about only architectural data, I fully understand you can keep them as long as you need, right?
No, that's a fair question actually, and that's a nice segue into the next slide actually. But and to be fair, Chloe covered a lot of that sort of thing in the previous presentation as well, the keynote. But if I would, so why are you going to do this? And there, well, for me, it's just the first line, because if your architecture is codified, your architecture is the code, then it's objective. It's correct. It reflects reality. It's consistent across the organization, uses common terminology, aligns to common standards, and it's transparent. It's accessible to everybody. That everybody needs it, to be fair. It's to be fair, mathematically pure. And if that's not enough, well, why? Oh, you mean you actually want value from this too? There are actually genuine benefits if you codify your architecture, but it's not in codifying the architecture itself, unless, like me, it's just the mathematical purity that you like, and you like it all to be tidy. But if your architecture is codified, then the use cases that hang off it, that you can drive from it. Again, Tony, you said the best architects don't draw the. What was the quote? The best architects don't just draw the future.
They shape it and yeah. But it's,
I would say the best architects don't draw anything. You get something else to do the drawing. That's the point. So if your architecture is codified, then the first thing you can do is you can ask questions of it. You can either programmatically interrogate it, or and Dean will talk about this, you can use AI tooling that to go and actually, through appropriately constructed prompts, ask questions about it. And so for if your business stakeholder says, show me this, well, if I'm truthful, the first thought in my head is, why do you want to see that? But no, okay, I'll go and do it. And it takes a month to draw it, to drag the information together. If your architecture is codified, then you just prompt it and it spits out the material that you need, that you can then pump into an appropriate visualization tool. Following on from that, you can then ask questions of an LLM, say, what if we change this technology that's at the back, and it can interrogate the model and the data behind it to come up with meaningful answers, so you can have some empiricism around decision making, again thinking about architecture strategy and the technical alignment. And then you start to get into, well, how can we automate the process of architecture? So no more manual diagrams, no more architecture diagrams, and indeed no more HLSDs or Confluence documents describing designs. It can be purely codified, and then the material just generated, which you can then test in the same way as you test production code. You can codify your patterns, your standards, and then run automated tests against designs. And well, then you've got automated governance. And then
I'm gonna pause on the questions and we'll pick them up at the end, because otherwise we won't finish.
Ready for 20 past dinner.
And I was gonna say, yeah.
Dean, after that,
Yeah. So So store up your questions. We'll take them at the end, and we can kind of take those into coffee as well. Okay. That said, audience question number 2. Go on, you.
Okay, yes, so we talked, I'm taking longer than I expected to, sorry, I started waxing lyrical, but how much exploration or experimentation have you done with codifying architecture or putting your architecture into a sort of a data-centric format? You've got to do something on.
You've got to do something.
To move on to the next question.
You have to do it? Yeah, what?
No, he needs to do something.
there we go.
I was for a second,
Yeah. So through for similar A through to E, how much experimentation?
Okay.
No, we like drawing pictures. All the way through to we've played about with it a bit, or we've got some ideas about the tooling to use, or we've actually got some of the data and can use it to do something meaningful with it.
It's not working for me.
yeah, it's not for me either. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm a little bit. Don't know whether you shouldn't have to re-scan it.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Yes, good enough.
Well,
Okay, fine.
The code again, sorry.
Right, okay, let's just flip back just briefly for anybody who needs either the questions or the QR code.
979.
It should, emphasis on should, just go from one question to the next, but as always these things, never try it with a live audience. Yeah.
I think he just talked too slow.
Yeah,
That was it.
probably. Okay, everybody got that? It's going in 3, 2, 1. Okay.
we have some artists in the room.
So how does that correlate with what you would have expected?
That's interesting, actually. I'm glad to see that it's people are experimenting and are actually using some of the tooling, some of the things we've looked at, which lock together the code and the visualization. So whether it's Calm or Plant or like C4, but people are playing with it, which is and looking at doing something meaningful with it, which is excellent.
Just quick, a lot of folk aren't buying tools.
Hmm.
So a lot of, it's EA tools been out there for 10 years. I think, a lot. I don't know how well I use them, but this.
I tried not to get,
Everybody I speak to has a tool now.
yeah, I
Yeah.
tried not to get into EA tools because for me, a key thing is the data has to be accessible. And often in an EA tool, it's locked away in a proprietary data store that you then can't interrogate, except through the visualization of the tool.
I was just going to say, you want to put AI on top of that data
Yeah.
store and get something useful out of it.
And yeah, I was going to say, and that's a good segue. So again, I'm going to move things on. Dean.
I think we're probably going to run out over time and just.
Well, I think we just have to.
We already have. So I did some work with a customer on this, and to take some of those ideas, it's nice to hear that people are starting to do some of the experimentation, because I think, the ask for what we were trying to do is, can we use architecture as code in the real world to generate, those big single views of your architecture across a department. We tend to work in banks, so there's thousands of applications, and that's really difficult. So you've got to start somewhere, and you tend to find that you've got these silos. You've got ServiceNow that's got some of the information. You've got ServiceNow that's got CMDB that's got your applications. You've got an API catalog. You've got data stores. You've got Confluence that has your designs. You might have those in GitHub, but they're all separate, and that's the first part of the problem. And you've got to figure out a way to go from that into a way to visualize them. So I'm going to try and paraphrase. Can we just? But you're right. What you need to do is to start to pull that data together from the common things and focus in on little bits of the data model. So applications are important. Your domain structures within your organization and how that relates to your applications is important. And actually tooling is important, because you can get, rather than trying to have those massive views that you have to maintain and draw boxes on, and every time they want to change someone takes 3 weeks. If you take those to your tool as data with a bit of manipulation, you can start to draw links between your CMDB and your application data and your organization, and where that fits in the domains, and the metadata about your applications that's important to those domains. And you can create links with the tools back to things that are useful. So you can start to create a bit of a circular reference model that goes, actually, from my tool and my big view and my bits of architecture as code, I can go straight to my designs. I can go straight to my Confluence pages about things because I've populated. Now you will have to use some of the features of tools or create those for yourself, like surveys. So the minute you release something, you do a quick survey, 2 questions to update where your URL is to your design, so that if anyone goes through your view into an application, they can then go straight from that domain and that application to where your Confluence store is for your designs. So in the client world, it's very much trying to take what you can and pull it together because but the good thing about this, when you get this stuff through, is that if you add another application, it shows up. And
who owns those applications?
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to traceability, accountability, what's upstream, what's downstream. And even in an event of a cyber breach or anything like that, we've got to go to.
And that's exactly why we took the approach of tying it back. There were incidents related to that. We can't get to the designs, we don't get to the owners quickly enough. We don't know whether it's similarly, if you're doing a design, is it one that's demised next year? No one really knows.
We tagged a number of different elements to that, but what we did, some of the work we've done before on conceptualizing into text and markdown. I mean, we didn't have AI at the time, but what we wanted from a cybersecurity perspective was to be able to trace the diff between the before and the after, right? So, and also once you verify and govern a specific design, if it's already text, it's very easy to allocate it to different places. So I think you guys are also.
Yeah, and the tooling helps you there because you can, as you do that survey, you go, well, actually now my design link is this one.
That's right.
That's
right.
And you've got traceability.
And then also you can go even down to Terraform and link the whole CI/CD in, right? So
we've taken a narrow view, but
that we've done with traceability.
It does depend on the story you're trying to tell. So your classification of you're either drawing a diagram or you're creating it from code depends on who your audience is and what kind of. We never draw the diagram for the diagram, although I love a good diagram. Right? You draw the diagram to have the conversation and bring the people with us.
So it's like
So have you got
multiple routes to visualize depending on who the stakeholder
yeah, so have you got good examples of this where senior stakeholders have used this to envisage the future, or do you still use a tool like a traditional diagram to tell that story?
And it's horses for courses. These were big views for the sort of C-suite type views of the world, and we actually used RDoc, and it gives you presentations that you go, I can build the views they want to see. And the good thing is that once you've built them, the data just fits into them. It wasn't all the data, but it allows you to, as the data comes in, they then become. The reason we settled on the tool, by the way, is because we tried it with PlantUML to start with, and it's horrible once you've got so many things, because you can use it small scale, but the minute you change one box, the whole thing changes and there's no consistency. Whereas tooling gives you that. So that's, to your point, is a really important use of the tooling. If we just
I was going to say, we need to accelerate through. So if we can let Dean finish off and then maybe hold any questions to the end now. Thanks.
I think what becomes really important is the middle of that diagram. You've still got your views, you're still feeding things in, but the middle becomes a data store that says, how do I take those things and create data products, if that's what you want to do. But you need a data store that codifies this stuff, because then you can start to build simple structures like JSON. It gives you a hierarchical data store with your applications in it that you can interrogate. And if you want to interrogate, you may have, APIs, MCCP server, call them what you want to do into your tooling, but you'll still want to augment that with other information. But if you start to do that, you can start to sort of build a JSON type view of the world where you can point at a large language model and you can start to have a discussion with your architecture, or you can start to generate things. So some of the asks we were asked when we were doing this was, can we accelerate what solutions architects do using this stuff? Can you accelerate the creation of views and dashboards for people, for disparate bits of information that no one's thought of before without having to go away and draw a diagram? If you'll forgive me, I've got a couple of videos that sort of build on that. Can we skip over this one? This one was about building an agent and taking all of those different bits of information in, and then going, what can you do with it? And actually what you can do is start to generate solution designs from a user story, because in the solution, sorry, that was the previous one.
Do you want the next one?
So that should have been. Okay, yeah, sorry. So you can start to generate them from a user story and go, I've got my applications defined in a user story. I've got my stakeholders. I've got my, my business actors. what can I do with that? Well, if I've got this view that pulls everything together in a simple sort of JSON structure, it'll reference those things for you. And with a series of prompts in an agent, you can start to build out a template that says, well, here's what this bit of my application entity looks like. That's slightly trite because it's a bit of a generated diagram using Plant UML, but from a cut down data set. Then you can summarize your user requirements. Really simply drops in there. Then you can say, extract those requirements for me into a list. I don't want to spend time summarizing all of these things. Who are the business actors? I can pull them out because they're codified. What's my logical architecture here? What's my applications? What's the state of them? I can pull all of that stuff together. What risks are associated and out there in my risk store from this stuff, because I've got referential things. So I no longer have to spend hours and hours and hours trawling through ServiceNow, trawling through a risk store to get this information out there. I can just run an agent and get the template set up for me, and I can spend the time doing the interesting bit about what's changing and where are my interfaces and things like that. That's from real data. That's from a real agent. I wrote, it wasn't in VB, but there was no need for that. Similarly, if we just skip over to the other one, the same diagram exists, but you can just generate a dashboard view really quickly, and then at the end of it, you can use a large language model for what it's really about. You built your data set in the background. It's JSON in this respect. Your dashboard plugins are all your dashboard plugins, but you can ask questions. Build me a little view of what applications I've got out there in certain states, or what are my most expensive applications from an RTB perspective. It'll just pull that stuff out for you and you can talk to it. Yeah.
Just one question. So I've done this. So I've built a large language model using MCP on top of an EA tool. One of the problems I found was we didn't know it made it up.
Yeah. That's the power of prompting.
Keeping in the loop is critical.
Yeah.
Hallucinate.
Also try to use a quorum model with multiple different LLMs, so there's different.
I just wondered because that's what I thought.
No, I found if it's table augmented generation, so which is the same as RAG, it's a table. But you've got to be really strong with your prompt engineering. Going, if you don't know, don't tell me. And tell me it's wrong. So much of what you use these models for in the background, so much of the skill is actually in the prompt, and not actually just going, I can plug this stuff together. You can, and you can build your data views, but you've got to be strong with your prompting. And if you're releasing this stuff into production, then you want models on top of models that say, well, you can build functions that allow you to structure your data in a certain way, but then you'll want to use something like Pedantic to go, is it right? Has it told me what I want to do, or it can go back? So you can start to build iterations, and then you've got to store traceability and things like that if you're doing it in the real world. These are just examples of how you start to use your own data to get there.
Yeah.
I'll stop.
Okay, I'm gonna pause questions there. Let's pick questions there. Let's get to the end of this. I'm kind of conscious we're kind of over time a little bit. Okay, final audience question. So again, same format. I don't know if I need to go to the next slide and get people to log in again, or what? So is it still on question 2? Okay, fine. Didn't do this when we trolled it, did it? But there we are. Okay, fine. So if I just go back, just to remind people, so it's a bit of a lag on here. So again, a spectrum from no, the robots will kill us all, or actually we're all out of a job, but we'll be sending that notification automatically. So in places in between. Okay, let's start to have a look at the results. Similar shape to the last one, actually, isn't it? Maybe we'll go hand in hand a little bit.
I'm very interested to know who's actually answered yes to question A there, because I mean, there's a serious spin on it. Is it, and you alluded to it there, is how far do you trust them? It's a really, really serious point.
I think one of the things that, I've had a discussion a long time ago that we're losing touch with the real underlying fundamental foundations, and it's like the physical stuff. I was talking to someone the other day that I feel that esoteric, I'm kind of floating above, I'm always virtual, I'm always on top of something, and I'm like you, 35 years, or at least when I started out, we had screwdrivers and stuff, and it was all about physical stuff. And since then, you just building on top, and it always reminds me of that picture with this building infrastructure, and I've got this little thing like this app that somebody in Canada is actually maintaining, and it holds the whole internet
Yeah.
up, you know, type thing. And that's the bit that I think we're losing. So I think that if robots were to kill us all, it's because we basically take that little block away, and then everything just collapses, and we don't know how to rebuild it. I think we're already almost very close to, we cannot rebuild what we have today because it's just too vast.
Okay, thank you. So let's take this home. So summing up, and as you can probably see, I've spent significantly less time than Chloe on my imageware. You know, like just put something in Google for adapt and improve. And it's interesting, I didn't use Bear Grylls, and there was a Monty Python thing that came up as well. So I just used the standard corporate image there. But I think the point is, as architects, you know, we need to adapt and improve what we're doing ourselves to help us best serve, you know, the organizations that we're working with. And yeah, where are you? You know, are you rubbish dump, or are you kind of beautiful garden, or again, kind of somewhere in between? But the key point is in, the whole sort of, let's use AI. But actually, as we talked about, a lot of it is all about the foundations. It's getting the data, getting all of these controls and all the rest of it in place. And if you can do that, then, you can actually kind of get some value. And yeah, will the robots replace us, kill us, whatever? Let's hope not. But I think the point is that, we need to embrace, what sort of Gen AI, agentic AI, et cetera, can do. And we need to kind of get our hands a little bit dirty, roll our proverbial sleeves off, and all the rest of it, and kind of get in there. Because these things, these solutions, as Dean and you in particular will kind of attest to, are not beautifully formed out of a box that you can just kind of use and press a button and go. You have to kind of understand how these things work. You have to kind of get involved in them. You have to kind of sort of create them yourselves. And that in itself is also where the sort of architecture and engineering kind of continuum starts to kind of play a little bit. So apologies for running a little bit over, but that's it. So thank you for everybody. Thank you for the interaction. Thank you for choosing this. Thanks for Dean, for Ewan. If you want to continue the conversation afterwards, absolutely feel free to do so. Because we haven't had enough QR codes already. There's a couple there. One is if you want to collect on LinkedIn or just come and talk to me. That's to our website where there's white papers and blogs and all that that might be of interest. Thank you very much and good night.
We are actually looking for lots of input, actually, rather than output. Even though we are putting some observations out there, we are kind of looking for input. And I'm just doing a first intro slide right now. My machine says yes. There we go. So I'm Petra, and I'm part of the together with Galal, we are part of a team in the Enterprise Architecture Specialist Group Committee, where we are looking at at AI as a research stream, and we are doing lots of activities to start gathering information on how you guys are doing AI and how people are finding solutions. What are the problems that you're running into? And we're trying to gather that information and look at where we see patterns. What are the most common solutions we see? What are the most useful insights? What are the things we should be doing and shouldn't be doing? And part of that we've had, when did we have the last one? Was it in January? Oh, anyway, it doesn't matter. We had some round tables, and we've had some online sessions, and we'll be doing even more. But we use the conference to kind of do a workshop to try and get information out of people on topics, and we're going to be asking you to do an awful lot of post-its, etc. And I don't actually know, Con, can you put the oh, actually it's here. I just put that round. There is a Miro board later, so if people want to sign in and work with us on that, that would be really wonderful. But I'm going to really.
That's a presentation, not the Miro board, right? The Miro board is only on.
That's the Miro board, isn't it?
No, but because you gave it in the morning, so.
Sorry, okay, doesn't matter. We'll do that later.
We have a QR code for it, yeah.
We have time. So But the idea is that we will, at the end of the day, we will kind of do a little bit of feedback. What happens now? We're going to use AI and actually press the button on the Miro board and say, hey, what's come out of this? But we will also consolidate it, and eventually it will end into probably a research, an article in IT Now, and some reports on our findings of these FNs. And I'm going to hand over to Galal for the first.
Right, thank you,
4
Petra.
slides.
Well, thank you all for coming to this workshop. Let me give you just a bit of background on myself. I'm a professor of information systems, and I've been teaching and researching and methodologies and stuff like that for quite some time. And as I was approaching my PhD, I actually decided to study architecture formally. So I did a BA in architecture and a master's in architecture studies at UCL. And after that, I got into innovation and organizational change and stuff like that. Obviously, with the advent of AI, I'm really worried about it becoming a third winter of AI. You've heard all about the other 2 winters. Everything is AI, and AI gets people really excited. And I'd like to just take a step back and say, let's think about it as an innovation problem, where initially we have to frame the innovation challenge that we have. Okay, there are many types of AI. Most people obviously know when they say AI, they mean generative AI. Before generative AI, we had symbolic AI, things like expert systems and stuff like that, knowledge-based systems of various types. And I think before we rush to sort of say how we're going to do AI or integrate it with AI, I think we can manage the introduction or the deployment of AI, whatever type it is, through architecture. So architecture can be a really important guide and handle on how to get these changes into place. So again, think of it as an innovation problem or innovation challenge. We want to say, what are we doing? What is the vision that we have? And I'll constantly sort of refer to this diagram that is hanging there on the wall. At the very bottom layer, we want to sort of say, let's have what we call stakeholder or executive, both of them, in fact, executive and stakeholder envisioning of what we are and what AI can do for us. How do we relate to AI? What sort of areas of operational frameworks do we have can overlap with AI, and what type of AI, etc. So we have to have this discussion about where AI fits. Now, I think most people are now trying to sort of reason more about AI and not too excited or hyper excited about AI. I think you must have heard about the recent MIT study of generative AI and some failure cases and some over-promising that happened. And that got me really worried about going back to the reiterating the third winter of AI, going through it again. So we need to think about, okay, there are, even in Gen AI, we have different types of AI, generative AI, as you know. Even if we're not talking about Gen AI, there are other types of AI that might be more suited to us. In fact, one of the case studies that we recently read just completely did not do any generative AI of the symbolic type, like expert systems and knowledge bases, reasoning and stuff like that. And in that sense, if we are aware of the wider umbrella of AI, I would say we need to manage organizational knowledge, organizational intelligence before we jump into using something like Gen AI, whether it's LLM or some kind of other types of models, like for example the fusion models. Okay, so different types of generative AI that we need to consider, and we also need to think about integrating how we use AI with existing knowledge assets and existing systems, like for example databases. Perhaps we already have data warehouses that we have used to do analytics and stuff like that. Okay, did that throw any useful results that we can integrate with AI? So for me, really, even if we use modern generative AI, you all know they can hallucinate, they can invent things, they never tell you if you don't know, they never ever say that, unless of course you tell them, under prompt engineering, as in the previous workshop, do not invent things. So if you don't tell me that you don't know, we need to have like a filtering mechanism, something to validate, verify, take out all the rubbish, all the invented and hallucinated things before we can actually apply it usefully in our work. And then again, how Gen AI interface and interact and relate to our human experts and human people, and actual knowledge workers that have been accumulating knowledge over a period of time. So we don't forget that. We don't want to forget that. You have to integrate in the best way we can. And again, perhaps at the bottom of all this, well, traditional programmed systems. Yeah, we have programmed systems and legacy systems. I know some people would like to ignore them and sort of start afresh, but no, they can't because of all the investment and all the sunk cost in the existing IT systems and stuff like that. So again, we need to leverage that when we come to consider modern AI systems. Well, as Petro said at the beginning, we're not really giving answers, we're just raising questions. Again, this is a model of design thinking, and the thing I like about it, which is relevant to us today, I think, in the age of generative AI, is this early bit. It's only 2 stages, which is to empathize and learn about the problem, frame the problem, understand the problems. Obviously, sometimes people refer to this as understand the pain point of the users, but in our case, our users are the organizations who wish to leverage the best AI tools in their operational efficiency. So we need to empathize, we need to feel the pain, get to the pain points. I think in another discussion we were talking about, actually it was yesterday on dinner, how important it is to get to understand the problem. And that's what I keep telling my students all the time. If you understand the problem properly, it will throw out most of the solution for you. It will resolve a lot of the sort of confusing choices and the trade-offs that you have to make later. Deeper understanding the problem. Do not be arrogant, be modest to the problem, spend a lot of time understanding the nitty-gritty of how everything is happening. So this is the early bit about empathizing, getting to do, I mean, if you read the literature on design thinking, there are tools like doing ethnography, getting out to the field, spending time with people to get to the bottom of what is actually causing them that pain or that need to have a new IT system or new configuration of tools. Then you define the problem, you have to make it a bit more sharper. So, okay, so you want to use modern AI tools, what type of AI, for what purpose, in what way, what is the modality, what is the division of work between the AI systems and the human experts or the company human assets, etc., etc. After that, we ideate, we generate ideas, and we experiment. Because in design thinking and experiment, they emphasize the idea of experimenting lots of solutions, fail early, fail fast, try things out, and whatever works, try to learn from deploying it. So something like that, perhaps we need to think about approaching the problem, selecting what type of AI and deploying it in the right way. Yeah. Right.
No, you know. You can do.
Well, this is like, actually, when I looked at it, I wanted to sort of modify it a little bit, but it doesn't matter. It just gives you a general idea. I mean, I love working with visual models like this. A couple of presentations emphasize that, the workshop before that, and as well as Chloe's talk. Models that are easily accessible, that are visible, easy to understand, limited in scope, that can be shared among the executives and people while they're debating and thinking about things that are really essential. And I tell my students, you don't have to use a sophisticated tool, these are just PowerPoint. Yeah. And the idea of, okay, we have our database or data assets, whatever they are, or how it's built on top of that. Then we can use perhaps one type of generative AI, which is LLM, if that is our choice, or other types, maybe image generation and stuff like that. But we have to subject it to some kind of verification and validation, sort of trimming down, putting whatever is coming out of them in the light of our knowledge base and our accumulated knowledge. So businesses must not forget that we already have a stash of already existing knowledge. It may be not codified or available in an easy to access way, but it is there. And this has to be brought in to moderate, to bear upon whatever is coming out of modern AI that everybody's excited about. So it's this kind of model describes the integration of whatever type of Gen AI or other type of AI that we have chosen to integrate with the rest of the IT configuration and the human configuration of the organization as well. And here we come to this pyramid. Now, this is not a solution again, it's just a set of ideas to think with, just thinking tools, really. And it's a pyramid because it has a base. So thinking of architecture, it's like a foundation, or like your site, the most fundamental layer. And here we'll think anything that has to do with AI for the future has to be based on a base of sharing vision. And people have to envision the same thing, understand the present and where they're heading to in the same way. So we have a vision and foundation of common understanding. And then we think about whether we have the capacities and the capabilities to actually do that. Maybe we don't yet have a proper, well-systematized knowledge base. Maybe we need to work on that. Maybe we have to have a group in the company that cares about organization knowledge and learning, because we will use that to moderate our use of LLMs or AI type that we have chosen to use. So we need to build internal capacity and governance structures. So this, again, where enterprise architecture comes in, because, again, the capacity is that have to be brought in, will be part of the architecture of the enterprise that will pave the way to putting AI on top, on a top layer. And then the tools for infrastructure this time we're getting closer to actually selecting, or we have to decide on what type of AI. So we develop the infrastructure and tools for it. And finally, we experiment to play. Yeah, I think it's important, but this obviously is debatable, to have a team or teams of AI champions that have their own sandbox, if you like, and we can play with things and try things out. Yeah, so even if it's a hunch or an idea that has been thrown out in the meeting, okay, guys, you go and have a play with this for a couple of weeks and come back and report, and then we have another debate, and then we decide maybe a bit more sure-footed about where we want to go next, having had this experiment and these results.
That's what the significance of the pyramid is it that the vision could be far more than the actual innovations of.
It's as a foundation, basically.
It's an
You have to build on top of that. Yeah. Actually.
Yeah, handing over.
Did we have the,
Huh?
did we have the?
I'm gonna go and do that.
Yeah, okay.
The one that next one.
No, not on the next one, the one that I put as a backup.
Oh, the backup one.
Yeah.
Oh, have to go all the way down. Do we have to do that now?
Yeah,
Can we do that at
We
the
can
end?
do it then.
I think we are going into the workshop and the questions, so I think that's maybe.
Just
Yeah.
your question, because I think it's interesting because people often start at the top. They just have a go and then they try and work.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if you're going into my presentation, because I'm bringing in realism, so Galal brought in the academic bit, and it's very good at thinking through on what we should have to actually make this happen. So if we, in an ideal world, we would have this, and we would have the time to create this. And that's why it's also a different color, because what we see is that we will be utilizing, experimenting, and trying to support the business whilst they want to do lots of stuff. And I know there's lots of people from big companies here, but I work with companies in the Netherlands, small to medium enterprises, and we haven't got this. No, we haven't got an architecture framework. We have to do it on the fly, and we're building whilst we're also trying to support the business, and we're trying to put things in place. And that's key. So we're saying, look, we want to do this. So how do you now do that without having this? And that was kind of like, you say, look, we codify it, we'll get to that in a minute. That's one of the ways that you could do it, and you could speed it up. But if you haven't got anything, you've already jumped and leapfrogged almost into a space that assumes you've got architecture to that extent. And that's what this is really also about, is that we say, look, we need to create speed of execution. We are generally too slow. And if we're lucky to have a foundation, then maybe even then we're still too slow. So we need to really be as fast as AI, or maybe even faster, because we're trying to get ahead of the game in some ways. Now, I don't think it's going to happen maybe, but we need to do it, because otherwise becoming irrelevant. It's what the organization will do it, regardless if we want it to be done. And to be honest, they've always done that. We've got shadow IT everywhere, left, right, and center. That's why we've got so much technical debt, because people will just do it. It's the reality of the world. And we need to basically live with that reality. And how do we do that? And that's, for me, evolution and not a revolution. So we're thinking about, how do you learn to do architecture? Because we always hear about people, and don't get me wrong, because Chloe's got wonderful experience, but she's got God knows how much experience. What if you're a new architect and you're coming in and you're like, I haven't got all this. I've got that baggage, but I still need to support an organization and getting things done. I don't get the time to do all this. So how do I, and it's about go with the flow, learn the big business language, walk and embed yourself within the business, or at least have people that can, and if you're bigger, then you can maybe have people doing that, which is what we're talking about, the SWAT teams that can embed themselves into the organization. And it doesn't have to be an architect. It could be a business relationship manager. It could be somebody in the IT department, but somebody who embeds themselves with the business, thinks with the business, understands the business, and helps them define the change. So basically using ideation maybe as a solution, but you could have agile teams. It could be any way, shape you want to, but it's about defining the change with them so that you can help them make choices in the tools that they want, instead of them coming, hey, I want to, you know, have a tool, and I've already selected a tool because there was a consultant that embedded themselves with me and was able to help me make that choice prior to you being there. So we need to really build that relationship so that we're there with them, making the choices and helping them define that problem. That gives us the opportunity to really check on existing content. If you're lucky enough to have a repository or have an AI that can actually do it, you can then check, okay, what do I already have and what don't I have? And I usually, myself, I use the business capability model as a very quick reference as to what do I touch in the organization, dive into whatever repository I have and say, hey, this is where it impacts. This is what's already running there. This is the other strategies that you've got running there. How does it embed within that? And what's the gap that we need to bridge? And I'm actually adding value to that environment that you're trying to embed this in. And then you document change. So you can also build a vision whilst you're actually implementing with these people. And then you basically help implementing it, and then you can validate. And validate is something that I really would like to go into a little bit more, which is, this is about the process of how do I do that. So, so basically what you have is you have a change portfolio, and the idea is that you define the change. If you do your foundation development whilst you're doing it, as you basically, if you already have something, you check on it, then you basically implement the change, you document what you get, and you then validate with your current environment. And over time, you start really building up the information into your environment. But the key thing I wanted to focus on is about the validation and the curation, because I think the key of where we are going to add value is if we're able to curate the data that goes into the actual AI solution. Because we all know that it hallucinates if you don't put the right information in, if you haven't got the prompts. So to what extent are you able to differentiate between certain sources versus uncertain sources? Do you always have to have an open AI or an open source linked AI to provide you with the information? Can you provide or create a model internal, a closed system that you can use as a validation to an open source system and see if you're actually getting the same results or the right results? And that has to do with knowledge maturity, which is something that you need to build again over time if you haven't got it. And then you're basically, how do you validate the sources that go in? Are they credible? Are they verifiable? Are they ethical? I was talking to somebody about that. And then you validate based on those predefined expectations, as in the problem, what was it that I was trying to create? And that brings us back to really, really understand what it is, what was the value that they want to get out of this, and are you actually getting what you wanted to get out of this with a verifiable source, rather than an ad hoc, somebody had some idea and they don't actually provide the value. Who said it today? Was it you? You was, where are you? There. You said it early in the session about the fact that there wasn't any value in the actual solutions that were being built. Well, somebody said it today.
Yeah.
Was that you?
Yeah, I picked up on the branch finder, didn't I?
Yes. Yeah. So, and then also taking accountability, because if we say we can support the business, very often we're in an I told you so situation. Yeah, and if we never take accountability for the advice and the recommendations that we make, we should also take accountability for verifying it, and then we need to build that into our structure and our ways of working, and then support the decision making around it. So those are kind of like just thinking moments, and we really would like to think about how you can really enable AI through architecture. As in, what have you done? What have you guys done? How do you feel it works in your organization? Where are your pain points in establishing that relationship with the business and actually being part of that, you know, change effort? Do you get the opportunity to actually curate and validate what information they're using? About tools, are you using, do you have environments? Are you linking your information through like a reference model to the language models or to the knowledge models that you're using for AI? Are you building an internal LLM, as in, are you using any effort to create anything internal that you can validate against? Are you using AI for EA? And how do you evolve the architecture as part of your change delivery? So do you feel that you are standing like, you know, in a weight because you've got to create like the bottom half of the pyramid, and your organization is actually running ahead? So we really would like to kind of hear from you about this. So what we've done, we've actually put this online on the Miro board, or we have post-its here, but also we would like to have a discussion whilst we do that on, yeah.
I just wanted to flip the question, although
Yes.
it's outside of scope of what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Is that it feels to me that with modern assurance frameworks like the FTSE 2001, the importance of enterprise architecture will become even more it's because if organizations are unable to characterize the way they operate, they will not be able to get through FTSE 2001. So there is a sort of another side to this.
Yes,
that's
absolutely. And I think it becomes more important, but it also becomes, I think what you're saying is that, and I discussed this with Chloe after the presentation, and it's the question that Charles raised as well after the presentation. I think it's about elevating technology to the board level.
Yeah.
And it's about how do I, as an architect, support the organization in showing them what happens within their current organization, what are the KPIs, what are the drivers for change, and how do I bring those into the strategy discussions that they have.
Because for the board to trust AI
Yes.
being introduced into their organization, they will look to enterprise architects to help them in that.
I to be honest, I think they look to consultants.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very realistic. They do not look to architects. I mean, if you're very lucky of it in your organization, I've yet to come into an organization.
They should. But what I'm saying,
They should.
The
I agree.
AI function needs to be elevated as
Yeah.
a result of the pressure
Yes.
on.
I agree with that.
I think the most challenge is whatever clients have worked is they don't look at to architects because the speed at which architects move and the speed at which the CXOs look at the AI tooling or AI innovation is much faster.
Exactly.
And they don't look at the approaches or the validation that is spoken.
Yes,
They
exactly.
directly look at the change and directly implement the change.
Well, actually, well, maybe in some organizations, but normally there is some governance process somewhere in the middle, right? So either you engage at the beginning of the governance process or later on. Doesn't matter, but you're going to have other groups, not just architecture groups, but are going to be involved, like the information governance group, the privacy groups. You're going to have the cybersecurity forums, vendor management, a lot of other areas, data, if you are having master data management, reference management, a lot of other areas you're going to be involved in that decision making. So either it will go ahead or block or become POC or whatever, right? But I mean,
To be very honest, I think most CIOs in the scenario that you described there, they're actually running behind the business, trying to provide them with tools, whilst the business has already spoken to most of the AI consultants and so on, and they already know what they want. They've already thought through their business problem, which means you need to get into the driving seat and understanding what the business wants and what the business needs from a business perspective in order to generate value. Why am I creating a branch finder? Well, because somewhere in my customer feedback, I probably had I can't find it online. I mean, I was personally thinking when you said that, I thought, actually, I always go to the company website to find out where their locations are. And I'd be very disappointed as a customer if I couldn't find it.
Just one thought, back to
Yeah.
trusted advice, I think is really important, because
Absolutely,
there's a
yeah.
vacuum here where, you know, the CDO will be saying, I own AI, and then, you know, the two, I own AI, and now EA wants to look at owning AI, and I think it's, how do you become a trusted advisor to the decision maker?
The key challenge is it's a diffuse subject, and people are motivated by, and what we often miss in the kind of EA space is what individual motivations are. So like workplaces where they've got marketing departments, right? They're measured on uplift of thing, and they'll be given a free rein as to how they achieve that. So they'll be actively looking at these technologies, they'll be talking to the vendors, they'll be going out and trying stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're being paid to do. So it's that, okay. Whereas other bits of the team will be going, I've got this particular problem. If we don't understand what's driving them, why they're going to talk to those people in the market.
I'm going to put sort of challenge in here, and just this conversation is we're sitting here saying people should come and talk to us as enterprise architects to talk about AI. If I was, say, CDO, for example, a lot of the AI solutions which have been given to us today are already boxed. They're not. We're very used to building solutions. We're very used to people coming to us and go, oh, what bits do I need? You go, oh, I need this. The AI solutions, a lot of them are coming to us already packaged. You know, you can see it with Copilot's going into Teams. Question would be, why would I want to speak to architecture?
Yeah.
Because I'm not asking for a solution. Microsoft have come to me, they packaged it, they talked to me about security, they talked to me about how it integrates, they talked to me. Question I'd have is, do we actually add any value?
Yeah.
So into that particular part of the conversation. So it might be I've put it in there as a challenge to think about our role.
Yeah.
I think that trusted advisor can be two things though, right? It can be I'm gonna be your expert in technology. I don't think enterprise architecture can ever be. You've always got to draw on your specialists. These things will be moved so fast.
Yeah.
And there's a trusted advisor as to how do I evaluate whether this is the right thing for me, and how do I get this thing produced? How do I make sure I'm doing the right things by the business? How do I make sure I'm not doing something that somebody else is already doing?
Yeah.
And that's
part of your being integrated within the organizational change environment, which is what I'm saying. It's like it's about stepping up. So we did in our organization, we know people are going fast, but we also know that people are actually working on fairly small problems, really big, meaty AI problems, real like business problems sorted by algorithms and all that sort of stuff. They are not being done very frequently. They are usually business cases, large business cases. They involve millions of funding to get people, consultants on board and so on. So what we created was really some simple principles and said, look, we can't stop. I know this organization stopping Copilot and all that sort of stuff. Like, look, do the small AI, get used to it, use it. There is a danger in that as well, because the biggest danger is that I have my carpenter. Yeah, we spoke about it. And there's a carpenter from somebody I know, and he does everything with AI. He asks what the weather is, and he asks what it is, and he says, "Oh, what is this? What is that?" Very small problems, daily problems. He puts into AI and he gets an answer. What that does, it actually puts a false sense of confidence into AI. At the basic person, as in the normal person, is getting used to AI. And they're thinking it's always right, because they're being convinced, they're being taught, they're biased, that in their mind, it is always right.
Just one thought, which I've used at a previous organisation, is sort of leaning into the fact it's happening and actually thinking, how can I add value? And the way that the EA team worked in a couple of organisations ago, we coordinated the insights. We didn't actually wade in about the technology. We said, okay, the contact centre has got these new insights. Wouldn't it be great if we could share those with the marketing team? Yeah. And by having that conversation, it showed you're trying to add value, you're trying to join stuff together. And then you start to get into conversations such as, how's that going to work with the data? And people get the why. So I think there's choose your entry point as well. Yeah, don't go in just saying you shouldn't be using it. Go.
Don't mind my happening now.
Because you're putting from an enterprise perspective, aren't you?
Yeah.
Connecting the dots, whereas often these use cases are coming
Yeah.
from, you know,
Come
a
down.
specific point and they're siloed thinking.
Yeah.
Can I
So
just
we
ask-
had a rule, and because I just,
Yeah,
the story was about the fact that we put these rules in and said, just do the small bits.
Yeah.
And we will help you with the big bits. So if you do the big bits, we want to be part of, you know, your change and understand what you want and understand how it fits in the strategy, how it understands, what are you actually generating? You know, is it a profit? Is it a cost? Is it, well, what are you trying to do?
So I think there's two things, right? First of all, to your paradigm about the carpenter, right? In the very, very old days, for those who are very few people who are more than 30 years in this, right? Oracle was coming in, we had all these books, you know, the bookcases, very books, trying to understand what's happening, going into papers, blah, blah, blah. You know, the books, obviously printed books could never be fast enough with the changes that would happen in software, in order to time. Then Google came, right? And Stack Overflow, and everybody was, oh, well, okay, I'm gonna research the problem, right? I think now we're looking at the secondary evolution of that, which is the AI, right? So this is it's gonna be like when Google came in, right? I mean, I say Google, I don't obviously work for them or whatever, but you know, it's whenever this happened, that change in the way of working for technology stuff, right? Or we'll Stack Overflow, we'll do this, we'll search this. Now it's, oh, we're gonna use this LLM, or we're gonna do that and that. And this very inherent danger for sure, right? But you know, it's gonna happen either way, right? So we just need to manage that part. The second part on your solution is around total cost of ownership and total cost in general, right? So we have people going to, I'm gonna mention conference here, right? Oh, it's gonna cost $10 per person. Yeah, maybe. But by the time you put all the cybersecurity around it, and by the time you integrate it properly, and by the time you do the POC and you research it and all that, that cost is not $10. You know, and then you cannot switch to Monday.com or to wherever else you want to go to for $10, right? That's not how it works, right? The data is owned by the organization.
But
There are
that's,
certain policies and
but what you're
practices.
saying there
The
is,
governance side.
but there is also, big companies are throwing AI at everybody cheap. It is the same as this penetration marketing from the AI perspective. You know, here you go, don't have to pay for it. I mean, when I built business case back in 1995 for NT Service versus Novell Networks, because it was user-based versus server-based, and it saved millions for the organization at the time. But, you know, and that's what's happening now. We're saying, look, you're getting it for free everywhere, and there comes a point that we are going to pay for it. The more we use it, the more we're going to pay for it. And that's what we're not seeing is the future about how much am I going to pay for it in the future.
Which could be quite a lot of money, because we're now pumping a lot of money just to get into a market penetration exercise.
Yeah, we're paying for ineffective solutions.
I think that's what we're saying. When we have a lot of money being pumped into similar kind of engagements, that's where we can build our trust. Let's say there are 3 different AI engagements. Once we're talking about, let's say, text to SQL, one we're saying text to image.
Yeah.
There are 2 different teams who are building the same kind of engagements. They have to wrap it around with governance, with security, with models and everything. They spend thousands of money on that. Now, when we as an architect get into that, we say, you have done it, but this has been already done by a different team. This will have you a better, faster time to market. So you get the solution at a faster pace and with a lesser cost. Then they said, oh, for that reason, I should come to an architect. That's why we build the trusted advisor, the catalyst kind of a thing where they know that, yes, we have seen
it's also
data.
a visibility level,
The
right?
visibility,
Between
exactly.
SA and EA, right? Horizontal versus vertical, right? So all of this will come together.
What's wrong, Sandy?
It's more around the horizontal piece. When we look at the different small siloed engagement and
That's where
combine them
the cost savings and the
And I
integrations
think
and the
business talks about the cost and the money amount spends on a technology. And when we say that you can't spend £1,000 on this, you can spend £10 and you get everything. Then they say, oh, there's a value add for it. I have a £900 savings on a particular engagement. Then they come to us.
But that's why Duncan's point about being a trusted advisor is really important. How do you get to that?
Yeah.
And if you haven't been there already, which I suspect is happening for most people, how to build it. And I think the idea of having models, clear, accessible models that people can synchronize around is really, really important, because this gives you the authority to be able to say, we can integrate these things in this way.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask another quick question? Who else cares about this? I mean, are the CDOs somewhere else in London sitting around the room trying to break into AI or
I think what I'm seeing actually, and I'm seeing it in the company where I work now, is that we're starting to have a realization that there's a security risk and an ethical risk to using the data. And I think that's an entry in, and that's where I think, so initially no, and now with some companies, you're seeing that people are seeing the risk.
But should we join forces with other parts of the organisation rather than just trying to fix it on our own?
We should, but we currently see, I mean, I was to a meeting, I was invited to a meeting with all the CISOs from all the banks, with organized by American company, also, but you know, and the discussions were how to protect Hugging Face is coming in, you know, they'll download models, well, we're going to do sandbox everything, blah, blah, blah. Lots of discussion. So we understand from domain because it impacts them directly, but not the opportunity domain, right? So the question would be, you know, how do you join forces, right? Because it might, for some organizations, see as a risk, and for other parts of the organization, see as an opportunity.
So CTO perhaps, if you have to motivate this.
But who's seeing this as an opportunity and who's seeing it as a problem? That'd be interesting, because I look at this, see this as an opportunity.
Yeah.
But some of the language perhaps I'm hearing is people are seeing it as a.
Well, my question was kind of like, guys, where have you had success or where have you had real problems?
So to Duncan's point there, I always talk of enterprise architecture as market making, right? So internally, how do you have the conversations?
Yes.
And we put control points in and made sure we were having conversations with the security guys and the PIPO people, etc., making sure that they all knew about all these things. The key thing here is, back to the trusted advisor piece, is how do I take you through that and how do I help those people understand that it's actually the same process, but it's different things that you need to think about. So
but that brings it to a communication.
Yeah, I'd say
issue.
give the model.
Yeah, it's not just a model, it's also communicate because
so the danger we have is we invent a new model for this. Right? So this is a fundamental thing, is how do I identify that this is of value to this part of the organisation, and how do I safely control its change?
You hit a really good point, because that's why I asked the question from you. So for me, when I think about architecture, I think about it as something that creates transparency underneath the change delivery process and helps people make decisions. So yes, if we do that very often, we are seen as people who give good information and people will come to us for guidance. And unless we're a trusted advisor, we will never become a delegated authority. They won't give us that power to do it. Sorry, they're just finishing the thought. And I think that the penetration of being not just in, hey, I'm getting a problem presented to me and I provide a solution in the solutions architecture space. We need to elevate ourselves to that strategy discussion and to the portfolio rationalization process, and understand how does your organization make change happen? How do we make it happen? And that's where you need to insert, I think, your knowledge, but that's not the same for every single process.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it's back to, as the trusted advisor, how do I build a team around me that understands the things that are different about this?
Yes.
So good example, in the previous place, we were looking at whether we were going to use generative images to take pictures of models and put them into different outputs. That sounds like there's a Gen AI thing there, right? But actually the DPO goes, do you know what? We've got contracts with those people about how we can use their imagery, etc. Have you, because you're now going to be passing their image into
exactly.
So it's that back to it's the same problem we would have is we were to do that in Photoshop. You know, so we've hit that problem before.
So is it about asking the right questions?
Yes, it is, and it's back to I can, as an EA or a technology professional, my job is to go through the cycle of technological change lots of times, so I can help you as the business person to go through that this time and think about it constructively and work through. But
do you get the opportunity directly?
If you come again back to market making, right?
Yeah.
So previous places, I set up kind of forums in a couple of ways. One is what I call the control point forum, which is the people that can stop a thing. Okay, and then are you aware of this? Are you aware of the chatter? And they go, oh yeah, this has come up, etc. And then some of that is the enabling forum, which is I've got these demand coming around. Oh, that's really interesting. These, back to your point, join the dots, right? And the combination of those two and direct and market make between those groups to say, oh, you should go and talk to those people is often a good way round.
I think there's a bit of a hangover from what I remember. It's about 7 years ago, I ran a digital transformation task force, because we were just, well, it might have been more than 2 years. And we were the agitation between digitalisation and digitisation. And what the 6-week process I ran with, from the board right the way down, and that's critical, right? And at the point of describing a framework, we went through product services and a number of other things, but the two things that were most important were the enablers and the mindset. And I think the mindset is something, I mean, you talk about there with the quick wins or the quick, allow them to do the quick things that have got a bit of an implication to them, but it's about how would you leverage that mindset so that we can go forward and make the right, consciously right decisions. So.
The other interesting thing you have coming out in the AI, which again is not new, but is more pronounced, is how is this going to impact my work? And what we've really got is two sets of competing motivations, and even different motivations within the same team. So I know quite a lot of developers will happily use Copilot, right? Because actually it makes them a lot more productive. They've gone with it. But would you say, are they going to publicly say, let's go for Copilot because actually it might make you redundant? They're probably not. But at the board level, they're going, right, you can cut your workforce, etc., etc. It's how do you pick out what the real true motivations are and what the capabilities are.
Which is again, it's about also knowing your business and know where the decision, and you had made a really good point, and I had it put on there, it's been about the decision makers. Who are the decision makers, but also being part of that discussion with a decision maker on why are they doing that, which means you need to insert yourself earlier and earlier into the process of change in your organization. That means knowing your organization, knowing how they make change happen, how do they make decisions, and not just, oh, what's your problem and what's my technology solution that I provide.
How they incentivize people, how people are incentivized, the incentives provided.
Yeah, but I think it's about different levels, isn't it? I think if you think about it, because we're all, this is enterprise architecture. How many people here are enterprise architects? Everybody's an enterprise architect, because what we're talking about is the fact that we have many solutions architects that walk into an organization and go, I can give you the solution. So it's also about making sure that within your architecture team, you're consistently linking the solutions back to your, and I take it's your reference architecture or whatever, but so that at a top level, you can see what the different motivations are for doing things across your organization, and that you have that drill down. And that's where your tool would be excellent. Not to promote it, but
there's a key point you made though, which I think is entirely valid, is understanding what the capability is. AI is a shiny thing at the moment. And if there are things it can do, there are things it can do well, there are things that people try and apply to, it won't be any good. So if you're part of the decision-making process and can help shape the use of AI in the organization, it's taking a step back from the shiny thing and saying, this is what it can do for you. But understand, and also, and I think we're talking here, what's on the pyramid about what's within your organization. Nice people aren't the only ones using AI. No. AI is also being used to build very sophisticated threats, particularly. So, I mean, we work mainly
for us. There's another first work on that side from the top 10. But what do we want to add? Shadow AI as one thing to add in, which is basically people who are using AI outside the organization without the organizational knowledge. And then they pour the results, as you say, into the organization, and
Can I ask a silly question? A really silly question just pops into my head. But are you doing architecture differently because it's AI? Did architecture change? Are the problems that we are now bringing forward? Isn't that the problem that I've heard over the last 30 years?
I don't think so. I mean,
I think so.
For me,
I think it's the same.
I think it's between my paradigm of Google and AI. I think there's similar.
No, what I'm trying to say, I'm talking about the architecture process. So I do architecture. Been doing architecture for 30 years, and what I do is, hey, where do you want to be? Where am I today? Do a gap analysis, come up with some suggestions, and come up with a roadmap. And to be honest, I'm doing that across many different parts. I do it at the strategic level, I do it at operational level, and the idea is that I can look across all the as-is and across all the to-bes and understand what the consequences are of the fact that I'm doing so many parallel changes. That's the value that I think I bring as an architect to the situation. And we are now applying that to AI. But the challenges that we have, that we're saying, hey, how do I get in with the business, with the decision makers? Is that different from your issues that you had 10 years ago?
No, but
Yeah.
it's back to that. I'm not gonna, you were saying, well, they should be talking to the EAs. They don't, because power of the external consultant is, I've been through a number of those cases with other people. I can tell you what they have and haven't done. Whereas with the EA as an internal thing, and it's back to.
Yeah, but we also have not got that can-do attitude.
Absolutely.
It's a number of free tools that are available as well. That's the thing. It is slightly different because 10 years ago you didn't have all the free.
So, can I imagine it's right? It's, you know, we had a text in the previous place about what we're using, about, you know, productivity suites and stuff, but things have been like Google have been around online, and our end users are using it. So the danger is, if we don't think about our new context, and we treat our people as not understanding it, or not really living in that context, but actually, how do you bring that, to your point, how do you bring from what you're doing externally to, which has been moving with the time, people are using these tools because they find value to it, to how do we make that enterprise grade? That is the enduring thing, right? There'll always be, I think there was, you know.
How do you manage that with the speed that models are changing there? So we might have a policy where Copilot is our kind of tool of choice because we're Microsoft business, but someone will say, oh, I want to use Gemini because I find it gives me better answers based on my prompts. So you've got your governance and your kind of organizational view on it, but people will still go and do the shadow IT side because they can.
But is that links to me to, are we in the business of saying no?
I think
so architects are seem to be in the business of saying no. And I get suggestions, and yes, I have a direction. But if you have a good business case to change that direction, I'm there to serve the business. I'm not there to say you have to use this technology because I say so. No, you have and sometimes I make a choice, and sometimes somebody says, we'll do it anyway because my customer says so.
The policy would not have to be that specific. I think
No, but
the general policy guideline is something like upload stuff.
So yeah, kind of the same sort of thing about policy, doesn't it? IT policy. Ultimately, if you've got a tool, AI is a classic example we use. So people were using AI when it first came out. It come down to it that some Samsung engineers were using it with information that wasn't public knowledge, and it became replicated. So if you've got governments that say you don't use certain tools, then they have to be addicted, regardless.
So that's another really good one. How do you create walls within your organization to ensure that your internal, if you were to create internal, like, you know, LLM or you say, oh, I'm going to just let it rip on my total data infrastructure, that means strategic decisions. That means openness of confidential information, etc. And I think that's where you can really make a difference, as in the consequences of doing what you're doing.
I guess, sorry.
I was only going to say, you select the data, what you're going to feed it for starters, right? So you don't feed it necessarily all of it. So if your data governance is mature enough, you know, for the decisions you want to make, that's one thing. The other thing is, I think that could be a problem that will be solved over time. So I think in 5 years, I mean, I know, you know, this is not now, but the AI capabilities will kind of merge to a model that would allow, I mean, if they keep pumping money, right, to a model where the results are going to be kind of not necessarily 100% identical, but more advanced. So you would be able to exchange.
That's the different thing that we're talking about now. Not about the maturity of the product and what it can give us. In terms of what we're talking about really is the data that's fed into it shouldn't be publicly knowledge.
No, for sure.
That's a governance framework.
Yeah, that's kind of almost like a data question in the first place. It's like,
And I like that example.
whether they accompany it to an AI model or whether they accompany it.
That's true of anything, right? I mean, I've been places where, and I won't be where they were, but where there's stuff on SharePoint, you're going, that really shouldn't be sitting on SharePoint, right? It's not a new thing. To your point, I'm going to be controversial, right? So is our job as enterprise architects to consolidate the AI or to consolidate the application landscape, or is our job as enterprise architects to enable and ensure that the right technologies are used in the right places to achieve the business goals, right? So does it that if we could safely implement Gemini and we could safely implement Copilot, and they had distinct use cases which didn't overlap, and we put all the governance in, why would we not put both in?
I think that's the way that we want to get to, but you also get an impact from sort of like service delivery, saying, why would we manage Microsoft Enterprise and Google?
It's that conscious conversation, isn't it? Right? So joining those teams back to this is what the business is trying to achieve, which again is not new, right? We go, there's a cost to you making any change to the business, right? If we keep you as experts and you only maintain the systems you make, we'll all be on mainframes and whatever, right? We've got to put change into the business, but we've got to consult those guys and go, this is the benefit of that. I think that sometimes gets left.
So it comes back to that total cost of ownership that needs to be factored in when looking at the
Can I ask, is
that on there?
in terms of like as an EA, do you want to be there at before the decision's made, or do you want to be there after the work's been done? I'm going to take your close example. Where I work, our graduates did exactly the same thing. They went off and they saw how to put AI close onto models. I'd imagine pretty much every closed company in the world has done that. Google a couple of months ago announced that they've built a model where you put close onto your model. So we've been basically already superseded. But actually, from an EA point of view, I could have been there at the beginning and say, oh, that's a crap idea. And I put close on models because everybody's going to do it. Or I could have gone, oh, okay, I'm happy, off you go. You're following the safety frameworks and all that. It's great. But then the follow-up would be actually coming back to, what Petra's thing is, actually, I can see how this fits into the organisation, whether it's our solution or somebody else's. But I suppose it's what questions should we be asking with these tools as well?
It's back, I think, to your
There's a capability growth element as well. Right?
Yeah.
If it's a graduate team and they're learning, then building something that's been built already and not falling over the same mistakes, but it's essentially building up their own skill set, that's entirely valuable. If the end result is not going to be used.
I think that, sorry.
I was going to say back to your point about the statement you said about there, it wasn't whether they could do the systems to do it. It was down to licensing for the images themselves. And that's the thing as well, is how many protocols are being broken because something's possible, as opposed to seeing it's legal.
Yeah, but if this is back to
A few things.
to your point earlier, right? So momentum. Personally, I'm a fan of build it twice, right? Or build it, start building it, find the value in it, find out what you really
Because you really get time for that.
No, it's a good principle, right? If you want to go and experiment on something, don't assume that experiment code is going to go into production, but find out the value of it with the business, co-create, and then go, right, is there a thing out there that will do that for us? Is there today? Is there tomorrow? If it's not there today.
But to be super honest, I can always find a thing that does it. Yeah, and this is a problem. I can always find a technology solution that will fit my business problem. That's not my issue. Tech is not the problem. The problem is that I don't get involved in the actual problem they're trying to solve if I don't have the knowledge of the business to actually counter that or give them any good policy reasons why they shouldn't be doing it.
The other thing we see, and I've seen, is that we'll go, oh, there's a solution, you could do that with Copilot. Actually, what we can do is miss the context of why Copilot wouldn't be the right thing. We can go, I've got these set of corporate technologies or these sets of...
Which ties it back to organisational risk. So if I go into an organisation, so my background is I go into organisation in about 15 organisations, setting up architecture and business transformations. And one of the things that I do is when I come in, is I look at what's your strategy, what's your current portfolio, what's your current risk governance, as in what are the KPIs that you're measuring that are important to your organization. Those are profit, but those are also the ones where what's going to hurt me. Yeah. And those are the things, if you don't know what's going to hurt your company, then you are not going to touch the hearts of your management. And it's about the fact that we logic everything away. But ultimately, the people who sit at the top there, they're not architects. They make decisions based on what they care about. They care about their organization, and they care if the reputation of their organization is hurt, if they're making too much cost and they're not going to actually have the you know, have the margin that they need in order to pay their employees and so on. And that's what they care about. And that's what they should care about. So what we need to make sure is that what the reasons we give why they should change are usually kind of reputational, CDAs, governance, regulation. Those are our friends from that perspective. Yeah.
I think the other thing that you see in the AI stuff, and you're seeing increasing technology, is actually the motivation for them is to what's the impact on perceived shareholder value.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
So if I say I'm just investing in
Profit.
AI and you put that into your earnings call, you'll get a bump, right? So regardless of whether or not, because there's a perception that AI will be an amazing thing, it will bring amazing benefit to your business. Whether it does or it doesn't.
No.
Okay.
Also, just like, is anybody actually being asked to do this by their board?
What do you mean?
As in to own AI or look at AI?
Yes,
or
we have been, we
Yeah.
are setting up, we
So-
set up an AI board and a forum.
So is that
basically,
EA
and the
pushing up to
decision.
say it needs to be done or
No,
somebody?
it's actually basically saying from a CIO and CEO level to say, look, we're getting so many requests and we see that that it's almost like a waterfall. What do we stop and what don't we stop? So
Yeah.
we said, look, at the bottom, you want to do your small AI, you want to ask a question, want to be administrative faster, go for it. Go for it. We don't really, you know, basically that's the open stuff. We've opened it up. The big ones, we really want to make sure that you are hitting the value and that we're not, you know, approaching customers with a big risk of exposing their
The reason I ask the
data.
question is because clearly in that situation, you already have a certain degree or a very high degree of trusted advisor status already because you're being asked to help.
I'm virtually completely new to the organisation.
Yeah,
so
but
I
the
can't
perception is that EA can help, which is brilliant.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm just intrigued, you know, because
It's a
it
right
feels like a lot
answer.
of people trying to bang on the door saying we can help, can you let us in? But it's great that people are already asking.
Yeah, but I think that's why I said knowing your business. I see a lot of people and there's a lot of technology perspective on it. I'm not saying that's right or wrongly, but there's horses for horses, yeah? But I do think you need business architects, or you need at least people who understand business strategy, who understand how businesses make decisions so that you can actually insert yourself in the right processes and actually be part of the decision-making process. You can only do that if you understand how your strategy, you know, inserts itself and add valuable insights on things. And if you only have technology insights, you will only ever be consulted on the technology issue.
Can I ask a related point? I know earlier we established that almost everyone here are enterprise architects, but I'd be interested to know how many people actually feel that within their practice, in the domains they work in, they're perceived to be effective and value for money.
No.
Because I think in most cases, there's huge skepticism about the enterprise architecture practice. So I think that's the elephant in the room, in a sense, which is why I talked about, you know, the need to get to a position where people come to the enterprise architects, because if they're not coming to you, then they don't.
Well, I think
they
we
don't
have a
value
marketing
you.
issue and an image issue, because if I go into an organization, so I've just stepped into an organization and they say, enterprise architect, and I guess, oh, you do IT operating? No, I do a business operating model. I don't do an IT operating model. I do an operating model because I actually support an organization. I don't support IT processes. It's an organization I need to know. So if you're an enterprise architect, I found that I'm per definition defined as sitting in the IT department. If I'm a business architect, I suddenly elevate myself to, you know, board level, CEO level, or I get, you know, conversations with the financial directors and so on, but I don't get that as an enterprise architect.
I think one of the challenges is that almost by definition, we occupy a kind of world of abstractions. That's the bread and butter of life. And most normal people really struggle with abstractions, and they struggle to understand the value of abstraction. So that's where I think the storytelling becomes so important. So my number one value proposition for LLMs is in helping me to tell a story.
Yes.
If I can actually construct a narrative that people can actually relate to and understand, job done.
Yeah.
And so I that's how I use it.
I think that's a great one. Yeah, that's a great one. Can we put that on the?
Can I say something about the value thing? I mean, when I go in, I have to go in as a consultant, so systems design and configuring the IT would be the software, would be business units and stuff like that. And because they pay me, they think they would be getting some value, and the idea of being, you know, a supervisor and professional stuff like that helps. But But eventually, I actually have to give them visibility as to what is going on in the business. What I'm emphasizing the business about framing models that are easy to share, I explain it, walk them through it. And I think that gave me some of the credibility that I need to progress further on.
Yeah.
To give a different view, not so affiliate links. You know, when I'm building governance models, DBAs and TRBs and technical design of the reports, when you identify specialisms, right? So data engineering, service management, cybersecurity, to sign on decisions, identify relatively quickly or early the AI skills and put them as a part of that process because of the way people communicate and interrelate in all of these meetings makes everybody a bit more friendly. And by the way human nature works, you know, you get bi-directional strategic input and also output from our discussion. You can, what's the term I'm looking for, democratize or socialize it any way you think you need in order to influence the decision points going forward. So both
I think it's really good.
up and down, right? So
Democratize is good, I like it.
The democratization. Yeah. Can I ask, so the 4 minutes,
Okay. So let's get going. We're a nice small group, so we can have some good discussions today. So my name is Sharon. Hi guys. We're going to kick off. I think it's being recorded for all the people at home as well. So I'm Sharon Palmer. I am the Chief Heart Officer at Humanity Works Consultancy. We're a coaching and team culture consultancy. We've been going for about 6 years now. I worked in corporates before this for about 20 years at the sharp end of transformation. Not in the EA sense, although I did work with a lot of EAs. My background's actually in editorial, and I worked a lot in quite kind of legacy bureaucratic entertainment businesses who were trying to launch more kind of digital products and kind of launch their social media presence. And I was often one that was leading that charge. So I spent a lot of time working with business analysts, EAs, as we were trying to launch iPlayers, at the BBC, and at Virgin Media. When I was there, we were launching the Virgin Media Player. So I have a deep appreciation for the work that EAs do, and I always really valued that. And so when they asked me to speak today, I was like, okay, I'd quite like to come in and talk about my specialism, which is very much focused on human skills. What is it that we need in order to be able to deliver change? How can we bring people on the journey with us? How can we win over hearts and minds? And as a Chief Heart Officer, that is a lot of what I do. And now I work with companies like EY, HSBC, even the International Criminal Court in The Hague, companies that are fundamentally dealing with very stressful situations of change and helping them to navigate that. And so what I want to share with you today is how we actually do that together. So wrong way. I'll get used to the clicker. So what I wanted to discuss today are some of the challenges that I found through my research and my experience of working with EA teams and how they are dealing with those in these times of change. What the blueprint is to actually build high-performing teams in times of change. And I'm going to share a little bit about my personal story and the journey that I went on to navigate that. And then I'm going to share with you some of the strategies that we actually take our clients through on actually how to build that resilience in our teams and actually how they can thrive together. So we'll try and make this as discussion based as possible because I think that's the best way to learn rather than just me speaking. So I am not above bribing people to take part in force fun and icebreakers. So I thought we'd start with that and just go around the room and ask people what's one word they would use to describe the conference so far. And your answers will get chocolates. But beware, I'm no good at throwing. So just help us with me. I'll put that out there. So who wants to start? One word to describe the conference.
I'll start. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
I would say that.
I won't throw it.
Brilliant.
Yeah. What?
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay.
interesting.
Interesting. Okay. Should I throw one over? You want to choose one?
We'll take the one.
You want to choose?
Some people I know will like the purple one.
Not
Energizing.
energizing.
Okay.
I don't know what it is, but.
Energizing. Energizing. Yeah, excellent. Chocolate. Yes. Very. You're thinking. No. It's gonna take a while.
Yeah, but that quality street has, I hate fruit.
Ah, no,
And I know that they have lots of those.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Anyone else? Another word?
Invigorating.
Invigorating. You can have two. That's a great word. Love it. Have it.
Mine's diverse.
Diverse. Very good. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
If I see a conversation, we're getting on.
Yeah, you can. I'm trying to think of what the word is thinking about the connections.
Yeah.
And networking, which I really love. That's not one. We'll
I've
take
met
it.
old-
We'll
I
take
think
it.
meeting old friends was just the best, that's always the best, for me. That's why I come.
Which is all
Meeting
related.
friends of long standing.
Ah. One word for you to describe the conference?
Engaging.
Engaging, there you go, that's a good one.
Thank you, okay. Stimulating.
Stimulating, great, thank you. All right. Well, I would say actually, for me, it's been about humanity, because everyone that I've spoken to today has shared something of themselves with me, and that has enabled me to kind of connect with them in a very human. And I think that's what it's all about, because those are the things we'll remember. We don't remember the spreadsheets particularly, although I do love a spreadsheet myself. I think in the end,
spreadsheet.
yeah, we remember those connections, and that's the memories that we always take away. So let's see if I can get this right. Yeah, terrible with clickers. So I did some research into what's the experience for EAs right now in organisations. What are some of the challenges? And so this is a mix of statistics that I pulled from Gartner, from Deloitte, and some other kind of large organisations. And the
Can
big
I ask a quick question? This is going to be shared, right?
Yes.
yes, yeah, it's all in there. Yeah. Over 80% of organisations are in some stage of digital transformation, and that has a profound impact on EAs. So actually, you're at the sharp end of all of that. So actually, there's a lot of turbulence in the roles. A lot that was surfaced was around collaboration challenges. That can often be some of the hardest parts. So 79% of EAs said that they had trouble collaborating across an organisation. 77% were saying that there was a lack of stakeholder availability, which obviously makes it really hard to deliver, the change. This shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone. Project overruns and saying it costs more than planned. I've never worked on anything that's run exactly to plan, because no one can predict the future, and so we don't know. So there are always estimations. Change resistance, I think we touched upon this earlier as well. Most change programs fail because fundamentally change is hard. Although I've got a different slight viewpoint on that, we'll talk about that later. And culture, they are often people and culture are the barriers. Now, this last bit about EAs having an image problem, this is not me saying it, this was surfaced in the research, but there can be a perception of EAs as perhaps being a bit bureaucratic. Architecture police also came up in the research, which can create friction.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Please.
Yeah, okay, because one of the things that I find that very seldomly comes into this list is knowledge acknowledgement.
Okay.
So the acknowledgement that we have a ability or knowledge of the organization, not necessarily always IT, but that we have some kind of knowledge that is actually valuable or contributory. And it's always said like, oh, or you're just IT, or you don't know that sort of stuff, because you're not a business person. You have like this hovering identity that sits in between a lot of disciplines. And it's not always acknowledged that you do have that knowledge, and therefore you're kind of either shown or not being part of the conversation. And very often you have to backtrack and run behind the scenes to do stuff. And I missed that on this list, that there is an awful lot of knowledge with a lot of architects, and it is not always recognised or acknowledged.
But as a blocker, I would say, I suppose the blocker is the knowledge isn't recognised, but that image problem, there's a lot of people are called enterprise architects, particularly, who are not doing enterprise architecture at all. to be promoted enterprise architects to keep them out of the way. I'm surprised that Ivory Tower, much as I hate the phrase, hasn't appeared on the list, but I'm sure it will do at some point. Ivory Tower,
Yes.
the idea of the act of being disconnected from the business stuff, they
Yes.
don't know, don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, and EA does have an image problem. To a lot of organisations are starting to drop the term enterprise architect because it comes with so much baggage.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Do you find, let's say, the EA image problem, is that about a practice or individuals? Did it get to that level?
It didn't get into that level, but I've experienced that, and I think that some can perpetuate it, but I think a lot of it is just perception.
Yeah,
And
but say I've been at places where I've been perceived differently to other,
Right.
yeah, in a positive way, I'd like
Yeah.
to put that in. Because of, yeah, I know.
Sorry, I was slow.
Because of
I think we don't
my
go for a
attitude.
check flow necessarily, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do
Okay.
think so, but yeah, I had the same, I went into a company and they did a people assessment and I literally didn't know anybody who the architects were, so I just did nicely did my questionnaire. And I turned out to stand next to the marketing guy and the communications guy, and diagonally opposite me stood all the architects.
Okay.
Absolutely every single architect was in absolutely opposite corner.
So the naughty corner was it?
Yeah, I was in the naughty corner, they were,
Oh, you
I
were.
was, yeah, because I wasn't concise enough.
Okay. Yeah, so I think there are kind of challenges on different levels. And it's not just the environments that we play in, it's within the industry as well, and it's our relationship with other people. And that's no slight on us as individuals or our capabilities. I think it's a function of the work as well. So I think there are some things that probably we need to be more aware of, and hopefully be able to address some of that in today's session. Done it wrong again. I'll get it right. So a lot of what we talk about when we're trying to build kind of stronger teams and you know, when we're working with people in times of transformation, we always come back to the word resilience. Now, I think resilience is a term that I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with, because it's fundamentally such an important skill for us all to have, particularly in changing times. But I think it's also very much misunderstood. I think there's still a narrative that resilience is either something you have or you don't have. And we often think that in order to build resilience in other people, that we need to be hard on them, or we need to be hard on ourselves. And that is fundamentally the opposite of actually what cultivates resilience. And where we are looking at building resilience in times of change in our organizations, for your EA function, but even, I know you work across many different groups in the organization, therefore you're kind of in a larger, looser structured team, that resilience is really important. And so I wanted to share some of the data here, because I think we need to reframe resilience. All of the analysis shows that individual resilience training actually has very limited long-term impact, because if you're not working in a supportive team culture, it doesn't matter how much individual resilience training you give to someone, they're still not going to be resilient. There was a huge piece of work that was done by the US Army. They invested billions in delivering individual resilience training to their soldiers. And the data showed that none of them were more resilient because of that training. And that tells us something, that unless they were working in a very supportive unit, they didn't display any more resilience. Employees in supported team environments are 4 times more likely to sustain resilient practices compared to those in unsupported environments. That is the big difference. Actually, team resilience predicts performance much more strongly than individual resilience in high pressure environments. And teams with higher psychological safety are 40% more likely to be resilient and have much less stress levels. I just did a last one.
Yeah, no.
And then Deloitte actually, through their research, found that resilience interventions that focus only on individuals fail to reduce burnout rates. But actually, if you go in through a team and culture-led approach, burnout will reduce by 30%. And I think this is really fundamental to our understanding of how we build resilience in our teams and organizations, particularly for all of you that work as EAs, because you're dealing with change all the time. You're dealing with loose concepts of team structures. And that requires, I think, a different approach to how we look at making
Yeah, I was wondering if, I think one of the key attributes of an architect is actually tenacity. As opposed to that, because of the fact that a lot of architects keep doing it, regardless of the fact that they might not have resilience. A lot of architects are, like burnt out or always complaining about the fact that they're not being heard. But everybody is very tenacious and keep going back. That's not resilience, but I think it's more tenacity rather than resilience.
Yeah. So determination is really important, but at the same time, we have to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
And that's really important. I think was it Einstein who said, like, if you keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome, that's the definition of insanity. And I think, there's a lot of that.
We do a lot of that.
Which is why I say that we need to come away from the idea that resilience is an individual endeavor, and actually I call it a team sport for that reason. And if we want to create more resilience, if we want our people to be able to thrive in these changing times, then focus more on the culture. Focus on the environment that you're creating for your people. And if we want a strong culture in our teams, then it comes down to things like courage. Having the courage to have hard conversations. It's about connection. How do we connect on a human level with people? If we want agility, if we want people to be able to deal with the change and be able to make quick decisions, then we need to have a culture where we are grounded, where we are connected, where we understand what we stand for, why we're doing the things that we do, what are our values, what's the big kind of North Star, what we're going after. In a very kind of changing environment, standing on solid ground as a team is fundamentally what will help you to deliver under pressure. And that requires a very different type of skill set. It requires a different mindset, a different skill set, and a different cultural tool set. And it requires us to build environments where there is high degrees of psychological safety and trust. And that means that as leaders in particular, we have to show up in a different way. And that journey can be a very challenging. As I said at the beginning, I led, transformation in organizations, and I won't sugarcoat it. I was a terrible leader in the beginning of my career. I was what would be called now an accidental manager. And I led teams in a very command and control way. Because to be honest, when I came up in the corporate world, that was how we were taught to lead. And I wasn't just taught that way, I was kind of promoted and given lots of pay rises based on that. And I went for an approach that was very much about compliance rather than connection. And I was successful, I'm not going to lie. I rose up the ranks and I did all the things that we're told that we had to do. Until one day in 2014, my life suddenly changed very, very dramatically. I underwent a very routine surgery that went very tragically wrong, and I found myself on my deathbed. And I can remember as the surgeon said to me, like, you've only got a few hours left to live, and we'll do our best to save you, but we don't know if we can. I had this incredible humbling moment where I realized that actually I had sacrificed love in pursuit of promotions and pay rises and frankly power. And when everything was about to be taken away from me, I realized that it wasn't worth it. And that moment really scared me. And I would like to say that it changed me immediately, but it didn't. Because when I came back into the workplace, I did all the same thing all over again. Everyone said to me, you need to be resilient. You need to push forward. You've been given a second chance in life. Be strong. Forget about it. Move on. So I was like, yes, good advice. I'll do that. But I failed quite significantly. And a year after that, I had an enormous breakdown. And I can remember at the time, it felt like my life was like a vase that had shattered into like a million pieces. And every time I tried to glue that vase back together, it kept shattering even more. Because what I was doing was I was trying to bounce back. They tell us to be resilient. They tell you to bounce back. They tell you to be strong, to push through. But it didn't work. And I realized that actually in very challenging times, in the most stressful times, we are forever changed by those experiences. We're never the same person. And by trying to go back and trying to be this strong alleged leader that I thought I was highly resilient, I couldn't do it. And I realized that I needed to pick up pieces of that vase and instead build what I call a resilient mosaic. Because you see, with mosaics, you can pick up the tiles, you can put them on and off. And they are inherently more resilient because they are agile, they are adaptable and flexible. And as I went through this process of recognizing where I needed to change as a human being and as a leader, by being able to learn, unlearn, and learn again, that actually is what made me fundamentally much more resilient. And so when I came back into the workplace for a second time, this time I thought, I've got a chance. And I can either go back to being, forcing people to be compliant and be like, damn it, do the change. Or I can build trust. I can lead teams with courage, with connection, and I can lead with heart. And when I did that, actually, the success that we enjoyed was profoundly much higher than I'd ever experienced in my career beforehand, because I took people on the journey with me. I led with heart. And actually, I went on this journey to becoming what I am now, which is a Chief Heart Officer, which is a title given to me by my clients, because I do help people to win over hearts and minds. That's the job, through transformation, through change, through leadership, as we're taking teams through these profoundly challenging times. We need to all show up, not just with high performance, but with high heart. And one can't be sacrificed for the other, they actually feed each other. And through this process, I realized that I was actually starting to become the person and the leader that I was always meant to be. And I think all of us are going through a process of becoming, like Michelle Obama says, right, we're all becoming. And I think that's what we're going through in organizations. And I think we need more leaders, more teams who work through more human skills and focus much more on building that trust and leading with heart, because ultimately that is what will build us success. So there's two key things I learned in terms of kind of building these more resilient mosaics, the teams. And this isn't just based on my own unique, rather individual experience. I think most people will not be on their deathbed and get to come back and talk about it. But I went off and I studied positive psychology, coaching, stoicism, adaptive leadership. And I kind of took all of this and I was like, okay, I think we fundamentally, number one, misunderstood resilience, but I think we really need to think about how we lead teams. And these two things I've come back to time and time again. Number one, growth is not linear. In our teams and our structures, particularly for all of you as VAs, it's about recognizing that we are going to take many steps forward and quite a few steps back. But actually, we need to build in learning groups into our team structures that actually, where we can all learn, unlearn, and learn together. And they actually need to be part of the way that we work together. They need to be built into the way that we lead our teams. And the second one is this: it's connection ultimately that builds strength. It's connection that builds resilience. The first time when I tried to rebuild my life after I'd gone through that traumatic experience, I failed because I tried to do it by myself. The second time when I accepted that I needed help and then I drew on the strength of other people, that was how I actually built resilience. And I see it time and time again in teams as well. It's the ones that reach out, the ones that work with others. That is how we build that resilience. And so based on that, we created a 3-step process that you can go through with your teams. And it's based on the concept that we need to look at this holistically. If we're really going to build resilience in times of change, we need to focus on the mindset, the skill set, and the culture tool set that will enable us to become stronger with every cycle of disruption that we go through. So the mindset shift that we're looking at is we want to move people away from uncertainty and feeling like things are too hard or they're not sure how to move forward, and shift them into one of optimism. I call it gritty optimism, which I'll explain a little bit later, and one of accountability so that people can move forward together as a team. Now, when we talk about mindsets, it's not just about individual mindsets, it's about the team mindset. Because actually, where you have people who are feeling very negative or feeling that they can't move things forward, that pervades in a team very, very quickly. And so as leaders, it's really important that we think about what's the collective mindset that we want to create in this team. The second thing is the skill sets, and these are very much human skill sets that I'm talking about here. How do we coach people so that they can be more adaptive in these environments? You know, how do we ensure that we are making good strategic decisions in an agile manner? One of the worries I have is when people come to me and they're like, I'm a GSD, I'm a get shit done person. And I'm just like, oh, what about being like the person who gets strategic shit done? You know, that's really important. Like I say, we've got to keep grounded and be able to move fast. So much of what we're dealing with right now in the workplace is polarities, right? They're two tensions that we have to hold at the same time. We're constantly being asked to move quickly, but be considered. Deliver long term, but think about the short term. That is incredibly challenging to manage these tensions, and those polarities are something that we need to train people on. As well as, this is one of my favorite things to do, courageous conversations. In your talk earlier, where we were talking about, you know, the amount of times we don't have those hard conversations up front and they come back and bite us on the arse very hard later. And then the final one is the culture tool set. How do we create that culture of safety? How do we build that trust? But most importantly, how do we scale it? How do we make sure these become repeatable behaviors and systems that we can scale in our organizations? If we want to build teams that get stronger with every cycle of disruption, we've got to look at it holistically, and mindset, skill set, and culture tool set is a good framework to work through to ensure that your teams have the right level of training to be able to do this. So what I'm going to take you through now are strategies that we use with our clients under mindset, skill set, and tool set. We're going to do all of these together. So let's start with some mindset tools, because they're always the easiest to work on. Right, so in times of change, there is often uncertainty. So what we found through the research is it's not change that actually trips people up. Mostly people accept that change is a requirement and it needs to happen. The bit they don't like is the uncertainty. So there was a very interesting study done by the University College London. They said if they told a group of people that they had a 50% chance of getting an electric shock, they were off the chart stressed. If they said you've got a 100% chance of getting the electric shock, that group were not stressed because they knew the shock was coming, therefore they could prepare themselves. So it's actually uncertainty that we don't like. And there's something called the uncertainty tax that we pay. And that can show up in various ways. It's where we focus our energy and attention on the uncertainty and not thinking about actually how we can move forward. And so that activates our fight and flight response. Our brains don't like it, it tries to protect us. So we get hesitation, we get resistance, we get paralysis. We also get something showing up, which I don't have time to cover today, but it's super interesting, is the stress drivers. So these are 5 messages that we receive in childhood that profoundly impact how we deal with stressful situations. They are be perfect, people please, try hard, be strong, and hurry up. And they're messages that we carry with us throughout into adulthood. And in stressful times, particularly where we're going through uncertainty and change, you will see those stress drivers show up time and time again. And so if someone is a be perfect, you'll see suddenly they'll become very rigid. They'll suddenly need to have all of the detail. People pleasers will try to control the outcomes of everything and how people see them. Again, that doesn't work either. They'll start to become hyper vigilant because they're so worried about something going wrong, and that burns them out. So I think we all need to be very aware of how we all show up in these moments, but also how our teams are showing up and the people that we're working with, so that we can understand why we're getting the reactions that we do if we're trying to get something sold into a room and we're getting So we're going to now play a mindset tool, a video. It's called Above the Line and Below the Line. So I'm going to play a short video and then we're going to have a discussion about where we are on this line. So let's see if we can get this to work. Fingers crossed.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool. A line. A simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question: we are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
Hey, so I think you know what question I'm going to ask you all after this. is in times of change or in times of uncertainty, where do you spend a lot of time?
Location,
So, as they were describing in the video, kind of being below the line is what we call survival mode. And that's where often, I might open the door 'cause it's quite warm. That's where we spend a lot of our time. Because we're afraid, which is fair enough. And the challenge is, of course, is if we spend a lot of time below the line, consistently below the line, particularly, in team structures. If our teams are spending a lot of time below the line, that then is where kind of the gossip starts to come up, or people are like, oh, this is a disaster, how's this going to work? Above the line, is opportunities. It's a time that we can think, okay, maybe I can do something about this. So what I was going to ask you all to do now is have a chat with the person sat next to you. What kind of keeps you, if you're an above the line kind of person, what keeps you above the line? If you find yourself, often going below the line, what kind of keeps you there? It's just so that we can start to build some awareness, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion in the group together. So yeah, let's have some chats in pairs or in large groups if you like. Where are you?
I
know, it's like, oh, did you have a shot?
I think I'm going to be very Johnny Cash and saying I'm walking the line.
You are, yeah. I think a lot of people are.
Because we certainly have things which easily drop us below the line.
Yeah.
But then every time I feel like I've got below the line, just to go back to you. Like why do I for instance, what am I trying to do?
So I do feel
I do
like
above
the line, but
driver,
I do realize
that kind of
sometimes I can go to the
creates the landscape.
if something's really high for
If I'm in the just have to make sure we can discuss that, share that, communicate, collaborate. To get other people to see the same picture, or, you know, and that's the nice problem.
Say for example, like a TV show, but it's talking about a TV show. It really puts me off, I'm not interested. Then I become very close, I don't want to hear it.
I don't know,
in their life, and it's like what environment you're working because it works.
Pressure or situations where something
Yeah. No, that's not my child.
So yeah, I think exactly the same. It wasn't, so I spent the night in that conversation. And at the end of the day, it wasn't a problem necessarily. But anyway, the interesting stuff is that. Everyone seems to
It's kind of like being drawn the line right down there, so everything is.
But I mean,
Yes,
Okay, just gonna bring everyone back in the room. Hi, everyone. So, how was that conversation? What did you learn?
I got a hug.
You did?
Got a hug.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me, are there things that kind of keep you below the line or help you go above the line? What kind of things came up?
One thing, certainly for me, the environment I'm in, or the environment I perceive to be in, which might be not the same thing, will have an impact on how I behave and respond to my environment. And if I feel I'm in an environment where a mistake is an opportunity to learn, I will be much more above the line.
Yeah.
You know, my behaviours will reflect the environment that I perceive to be in. Whereas if I think I'm in an environment where I'm going to be punished, or my reputation will take a hit or something, then I'm more likely to be in that below the line. This organising this conference about those things. On the weekend, very much below the line.
Yeah.
Thinking, trying to think of all the things that need to be done that could be foreseen, but I hadn't foreseen.
Yeah.
And had I planned for them, had I managed it, there was like, because if the conference wasn't successful, it's somehow my fault.
Right.
And then by about Tuesday, partly because the time was running out and making any changes. And it's like, actually, no, I've already written down things we need to do differently next year. It's become a learning experience for me. And we're going to put together the conference plan so that last year's organizer, this year's organizer, we can start putting together a plan to help next organisers do a constant improvement job. And that brought me back above the line and bubbling, which is fine.
There's no one blame you anyway.
Well, yeah, so I think my main one is responding to the environment. And I think we're both people pleasers.
Ah, okay.
And which is odd because I do tend to have good, courageous conversations.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I'm a people pleaser. I will say yes to things that I really should say no.
Oh. Actually, it's interesting. So people pleasing, people think it's about constantly being agreeable, but actually people pleasing is much more about controlling how other people see you.
That too.
Yeah. So when you think about your people pleasing tendencies, you're really trying to determine how somebody sees you, Colin, right? So it's less about you saying yes or not being, I find people pleasers actually can have courageous conversations, but it's the bit afterwards where they're like, do they still like me? And I better kind of do this now next, because you're just almost controlling that external narrative.
Perhaps less of people pleaser than I tend not to care who say that.
So that's the interesting thing about people pleasing.
I went through I get anxiety, but I went through quite a bad now at one point. And coming to that people pleasing thing, I was trying to do that thing and almost like it. And what I found is it actually triggered the anxiety even worse. And it took me a few instances where I've done something, you don't know why you're getting anxiety. You have to sit down and almost like talk to yourself. And then I suddenly thought, I did this today, and it suddenly triggered. And I realised it was because actually I was trying to almost like reach out and help someone, which sounds wrong, but actually it was a complete negative impact onto me. And learned that I shouldn't, but I still do it occasionally, but I learned I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think isolation, I didn't talk about it, but isolation for me would be really bad because I talk a lot. People tend, no, I know it, and I've got ADHD, so it's also a little bit uncontrollable. So people see that and cut you off. And they go, oh, you've talked enough. Sorry, it's actually no, but that's true. And you get isolated. And that really is a bad thing because it makes actually worse. Sorry. But no, but in general I'm above the line. So
I think what's interesting whenever we run these sessions is I'm always amazed about how openly and honestly people share, and I'm very grateful to everyone that has. And I know these things can be difficult, but I do think that we have to make space for these discussions because we are all carrying so much. Now, I shared with you a bit about my story earlier. I'm not the only one going through challenging times or gone through challenging times. And so I think we've really got to show up with more humanity and make space for these kind of conversations and use these tools in organisations and have these discussions because it's really important that we understand who we are, who the people are that we work with and how people deal with stress. And I hear everything that you've all just said. And it's interesting, you've all talked about the environment and the people around you and the strength that you can draw from that, or when it's taken from you, that actually that diminishes your strength. and your resilience, and it pushes you into a place of negativity. And we're already hardwired for negativity as it is. So, which is why it's
but the strange thing is that you say that, like, you know, like I'm emotional, but in general, I'm just always on the positive side, because, I mean, yeah, that happens, but for me, it's baggage. The baggage that you had from your childhood, and also other things that happen when you're older, when you're like 57, you know, your whole lifetime, and yeah, I just recognize that I will always be above the line in the end, regardless, because of the bad things that have happened, not because of the good things that have happened, but because you do become more resilient. I think because of the fact that you've been able to deal with the bad things, whatever comes next.
Yeah. Hard times make us stronger. Very much believe that. You know, the greatest strength, the greatest test of leadership that I had in my career were 4% hard times. You know, when things are going really well, it's kind of all right then. But, you know, it's in the hardest of times you kind of find out who you are, who the people are around you who are going to support you, and that's why I said at the beginning, you know, resilience is really just not an individual trait. So much of it is based on who we surround ourselves with and the cultures that we are in. And one of the other things that I think is really important to consider, and something that came up in what I was listening to in your conversations is, and Colin, your example was the moment you decided to take control and decide that actually there are things that I can learn from this when you're worrying about the conference, you actually therefore felt a bit more above the line because you were like, okay, I can do something about this.
So the point is, how did Colin get to that? Because obviously there's something in the background, you know, that made such a person flip the experience into innovating more positive. I mean, some people grow up in such environments, families and stuff like that were so harsh emotionally that you don't have that. You have not been able to develop it. There's a difference between hard times like physically around it, like maybe illness or lack of resources or poverty or whatever, and hard times in terms of emotional support. Maybe you've been lacking, and then you know grow up with this feeling.
Or if you're in a school talking environment where support is not there at all, you have to be self-supporting.
There's a sort of flip side. I think about there's a program. I think it was Eton, Gibbon Harrow, one of the major public schools, and the headmaster said, "My primary goal in the school is to help my pupils fail." Because they were in that above the line where they had all the support, they had every resource they could possibly want. You know, they had that comfortable cushioned life. And he said, unless I help them fail and learn from that and become not brittle, so resilient, you know, I've failed them as people, because there will come a point in their life where something doesn't go their way. And if I haven't equipped them with the tools, the techniques, and the mindset to transition through that disaster, that failure, that disappointment, then they're going to be really damaged. So my job is to help them fail in a supportive environment.
Exactly, and a lot of what I talk about when we're speaking about resilience, and have time to cover it in today's session, is let's train people to do the right kind of hard things. You know, it's not about withdrawing support from people in a terrible way and isolating them. It's about saying, yeah, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to deal with the feelings. So I have a 7-year-old daughter, and we practice this thing at home. So when she brings her homework, I'll say to her, right, we're going to practice swallowing a frog. She's like, what does that mean? It's from the book Eat the Frog. It's kind of based on Stoic philosophy. And I say to her, tell me what is the hardest bit of homework. It's always writing, because she hates writing. So I was like, then you've got to do that first. Because you've got to learn to do the hardest thing first, because that will help you to feel more confident. Once you've done that, you'll feel much better about it. And then the next thing will be every time we do that, she was always better at doing her homework. There's less like, mummy, why do I have to do it? She feels better. But I think we can replicate that in our organisations. I think one of the challenges we have right now in the world we're living in a time of what I call a comfort culture. And that comfort culture is really undermining our ability to be resilient, because we're seeing it through the data. people are having much less open and honest conversations in workplaces because they are choosing comfort over discomfort. And that is incredibly dangerous. So I'm not saying that we need to put people into terrible situations, but a bit of difficulty is good.
I believe that. I mean, as a teacher, I say, well, students really learn when they're put under pressure.
Yeah.
So really press them hard and they just go through it. Once they've gone through it, they've achieved a new level of learning.
But there is the downfall of that, because that's what you said as well. I was said, got with kids, and I have it, and my sister and I were actually talking about it this week. If you give my children or me or my sister a tap on the shoulder, we will walk 100 miles for you. But put me down, and it's like, you know.
The most powerful words, please and thank you.
Yeah.
You,
absolutely.
You stand up for somebody, you help somebody out at their moment of need. One employee, his father was dying, and he didn't want to leave work. It's an odd situation with other pressures of the company. It's like, right, you go, take the time off, be with your father, but bill the time back to the project. So you got the project, that was his concern, project billing time. Not billing to the client, obviously, we just swallowed that cost, but billing back the project. So we covered what he needed to do, and then he can actually go and do what he actually wanted to do, because it removes the fear. That person will walk through fire for me there. It's a person that if I needed to, I could phone him at midnight and he'd do the work. Because I was there, his moment of need, he will be there in mine.
I thought I did labour, COVID labour at work. She didn't want to leave. She went into labour. I said, we're going home now. I said, we're going together. I said, I'm not letting you go on your own on the train.
Don't we see a little bit of that anyway in the stakeholder management situations? Because it's a little bit of give and take. I'm not sure if it's always emotional, but there is a little of it. It's also work related give and take. This is how we manage to spin things around and deliver what we need to deliver. Yes.
I think you better get onto that.
I know, yeah. I better move forward.
I've read the slides, so.
Yeah. So thank you. You're seeing it up very nicely for me. Apologies, the text on here has become a bit garbled, but this is a second tool that you can use. So once you've established with your teams the kind of above the line, below the line framing, a good conversation to have afterwards is, what can you control? What can't you control? Because a lot of what keeps people kind of below the line or feeling negative or worried is where they focus on what we call the outer circle, the circle of concern. Those are things that we can't do anything about. The circle of influence are the things where you can have some influence over other people. And the circle of control are things that you fundamentally have within your gift. How you see things, maybe what your role is, or that can be half and half sometimes, your priorities, your values, those are the things that are in your control, but the other things, we have to really work our way through it. So in this, we've got a blank version of the template as well, so when you get the presentation afterwards, you can always print this out and use this with your teams, but this is a really important way of collectively as a team and working together and saying what are the things we can control, not control, have some influence over. And then that then gives you a good framework to work on. So that would be the second set. This is a golden oldie, circles of control, but it never goes out of fashion because fundamentally in change, we need to know what we can control. Right, we're going to move on to skill sets, a bit of what you were just speaking about now. So the first skill set that is really important that we help our teams to develop is, how do we disagree in a healthy way? Now, all of the high-performing teams I work with, they can disagree, they can shout at each other, have arguments, and then they can agree in the end to be able to move forward. And I always say to teams that I work with, you don't have to be in agreement or even like each other to align on a way forward. You can still come up with a way forward. So you can have polarizing viewpoints on it, all well and good. But the most high-performing teams I see are the ones who are like, okay, we're still going to go ahead and do this. So there is a way of doing it. And so I've set out some things here on the slides and some ways that you can create that safety so that you can have that disagreement. And I've got some worksheets, but I'm very conscious of time. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to go through worksheets. So I think I'll keep this more discussion based. The first thing to do to really train your teams on this is to talk about the fact that disagreement is important, and it means that we are growing as a team and that we're focused on the outcome. It's not a sign of dysfunction. It can be dysfunction though, if you're being incredibly unkind to each other and shooting each other down and being, you know, duplicitous. So it can be. So I think we've got to set rules of engagement. So I always say challenge the idea, not the person. Lots of times I see people saying things like, "You're wrong." That's a shit idea. Don't say things like that. You know, say, you know, I might offer a different perspective, and you know, phrase it in a way that allows there to be multiple viewpoints in the room. Listen to understand, not to reload. Loads of times I see there, people are like sat there and it's like ready to pounce and they've not really listened to the other person. If you rearrange the word listen, you get the word silent. I think silence can actually be really, really important. I know it sounds strange, we're talking about disagreement, but my goodness, sometimes I have found as a leader in those situations, being silent has actually allowed me, one, the space to hear different perspectives, and then three, to see where there might be alignment. But I'll come to you.
Yeah, I'll put my hand up just to
and like I say, you can end with alignment even if you don't agree. So there's an interesting technique that Spotify uses called fail fika. So I imagine you all have kind of project learning sessions that you run, you know. So what Spotify have done, I don't know if you know fika as a term in Sweden, it means to have coffee and cake.
So from IKEA.
Yeah. And so what they do is at the end of a project cycle, they host a fail fika where they talk about the learnings of the project, but they do it over coffee and cake because everything's better over coffee and cake, right? But what I really like about the way they've done this is they've made it a ritual. So they've ritualized it. It's part of the fabric of their culture, their DNA. And it's about having adult to adult conversations. A lot of times I see in these kind of situations, I see the psychological model of PAC come up, parent, adult, child, where you see some people end up being the parents that are trying to soothe everyone. Don't be worried. You know, and then you've got the child, the person who throws their toys out the pram. Don't talk to me like that. It wasn't my fault, and you know. And then you've got the adult to adult conversation, which is trying to be where we want to be with the fail fika. But I think where we can try to ritualize these things and make them normal and have that safety and have the rules of engagement, that's really important. And closing with a one mentality rule is really key. It's like, yeah, I don't agree with you, but I think we're still going to be following rules, and I'm okay with it. One of the ways you can do that is asking more open questions rather than closed questions. So somebody asked a question earlier in the room, how do you create that psychological safety? Listening, definitely, but the second thing is it's the type of questions you ask. So if you say things like, who's responsible for this delay? It's gonna like, people are gonna get on the defensive. So we tend to say, try using things like what's blocking progress? How can we unblock it? You know, why didn't you follow the standards? What challenges are you facing in applying the standards? Kind of trying to unearth it, being curious, and really helping people to, you know, come back with some reflection and come back with the information. In the end, it's all data and you're trying to get to the outcome. So it's about how you can do that. So these are just a whole load of examples. And on the worksheets that I can give you after this and take back with you, there's more guidance on exactly how you can do that. Okay, let's move on.
On those questions, it's right, it's I used to do school governance, and one of the things we used to get taught is if we're challenging headmaster, or we've got questions about the team, is we're often not speaking from a position of knowledge, but a position of kind of almost insight. And it was a bit like that is, you know, where you got the, you know, get, is the project on track or not? It often, you'd have to almost sit there and go, that's not a question I want to be asking. I'm asking more around, you know, how's it progressing and that kind of thing. And that's right, it just reminded me of that from a,
Yeah.
and I was thinking of governance from an EA point of view, is often we'll ask like almost like blunt questions, or you see it, it's like, why didn't you do that? What about that? And rather than these more open questions now, did you think about that? You know, that kind of thing. So just wanted to kind of mention that.
Yeah.
I think there's a, I would say the humble architect. Humble's not often a word applied to architects, I'm an architect. But the open questions are the more, the humble, it's not a case of why aren't you doing the standards, it's like, well, what challenges are the standards? Where can I improve the standards? It's back to the bottom line. How can I help you help us? Same things.
I think it's also, I tend to attack it from, I'm a big fan of servant leadership. And I think we can and we're allowed to consider ourselves leaders in the organisation, but we also serve. I think we have a very serving way. I know a lot of architects might not agree with it, but I think we're perceived as people who lead, but we just lead because we always give a lot of information that might be followed up. Ultimately, we're just giving proposals and positions that people can make decisions on. And I see that as a serving rather than as a leading discipline. And I know that a lot of people might not agree with that.
My view is absolutely. Our goal is to get to yes. Our goal is to get to change, support the development. We're there to serve. That's our goal. We're a catalyst for our.
Yeah, no, good, thank you, I agree. Okay, so let's move on to the next skill set. So this is about how do we make, I'm not allowed to say. Yes, so carry on.
No, but I think it's important also that I think listening is not always silence. So somebody talking doesn't mean they're not listening. I think that's especially with extrovert people, it always gets commented, oh, silence is really good and listening is really good. And it's as if people that talk aren't listening. It's not the same thing, I think. It's not the same. Yeah, I just find a lot of architects are neurodiverse. A lot. and it's not always recognized. So a lot of people aren't necessarily always diagnosed, but I recognize a lot of traits with a lot of people. And I see that a lot of people do things and it doesn't always help in a situation where you come into an organization. Yeah, it kind of adds to the complexity.
My uncle has a saying, like, you spot it, you got it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just conscious of time and I want to make sure we get a chance to talk through all of these. So this is the second kind of key skill set. It's about how do we make these agile decisions but in a strategic way. So one of the ways that I look at teams and how they respond is I look at how long they take to make decisions, but the right kind of decisions. And so we talk about kind of red flags and green flags. So where I see teams are debating the blindingly obvious for hours, I'm like, that's not a good sign. And the green flags are where people give very careful consideration over what we call one-way door decisions. So one-way door decisions are ones that are irreversible. So if you go down the road and select whatever technology and you move forward with it and you can't reverse it, have a good debate about that, because that's, that can have huge implications. But like where it's something that actually isn't as serious as that, you probably could move through the process quite quickly. And so that is something I think to keep in mind as you're kind of navigating these discussions internally around kind of the technology that you're using or where you're going through these transformation projects. And so I recommend using, this is from the military, it's called the OODA loop. So it stands for Observe, Orient, Decide and Act. And this is a good framework to use in the teams, because what I find is in teams, if you have a shared language of what you can use together, this will help you to have those healthy debates. So very simply, what's your situation? What's going on? Why do you need to change? How do you need to change it? And then you're looking at the orient is, okay, well, where would we be then in relation to where we are now? How far are we from this destination? Decide, so what's the path? How are we going to map this out? How are you going to handle challenges and setbacks? And then act. Exactly what is it we're going to do to act? What I often see is that teams spend a lot of time in observation and then don't go all the way around. We're like, yeah, this doesn't work. And then we don't move through the loop, and it kind of gets left until it becomes really critical. And then suddenly we have a really quick decision, which isn't necessarily the best decision. And that can have a profound impact on the transformation team. So OODA's a good one to have in your back pocket. And then the next one, which I think is really important, is polarities. So polarities, and I think as EAs, I think you are constantly having polarities. Two tensions. All the time we are being asked to navigate double tensions, right? Short-term goals, long-term goals. Moving at speed, but thinking about things, you know, like all the time. And particularly for those who are perfectionists, that is really challenging because we don't like to play in the grey. We like either or situations. And the thing with polarities is you can't solve one for the other. You have to acknowledge that we need both. And so having that agility in our mindset is really important. In psychological terms, it's called cognitive dissonance. It's your ability to be able to withstand two opposing things at the same time. And so a good thing to do, and I think this is something to do with multiple stakeholders in the business, is getting everybody who's working on the transformation to think about what are the upsides and the downsides of short-term and long-term focuses, and actually how that will play out for the project that you're leading. And if you do it all together, then actually everybody buys in. And so as the project's going on, if you think things are going off kilter or something's becoming too short-term focused or too long-term focused, then I think everybody's then done this example and you can come back and work through it together. And I think, to be honest, this isn't something that we get taught in schools or in university. And even in the workplace, I think there's an assumption that we'll just be able to roll with the polarities. But actually, I think this is something that we really need to be able to train in people. And that's one of the worksheets that I brought along today. We can work through polarities together. I'm moving through at pace because I thought we might have time for a discussion afterwards, but please do ask questions as well along the way. So the final bit is the culture toolset. How can we create this culture where people feel safe? How can we build this trust? How can we take people on the journey with us? How can we win over hearts and minds? So one of the things that we've done quite successfully with some kind of groups that are undergoing change is actually what grounds us, what holds us together. What is it that we want to achieve with the transformation that we're working on? What's our North Star? What does it look like? And so one of the activities we give them to do is actually bringing that group together and saying, design your magazine cover. So what would that transformation look like? How would all of the teams work together to actually achieve this? And when you do this, it actually engages all the stakeholders who are working on that transformation together, and it establishes how you might be able to work as a unit. So it's not about being in an EA team, it's about the various teams that you're working with. But this kind of brings it back to that North Star, like why are we doing this? And it's quite a fun way of getting people to kind of visualize what that future outcome might be.
Right, got not quite to this level, but there's a set of one of our agile teams. They name all their sprints after like games or books, or films. Working groceries, so they added like food skin to it. But they then create an AI image to do it for each sprint. It's labelled Fruit Loop or something, and they've got a picture to go along with it. And I'm just looking at that and go, if they actually added what they were going to achieve on the sprint, it'll almost like it would be what you've got there. So I might go and suggest it to them. Take them.
I mean, this is ChatGPT did that.
yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah.
you get a whole space and they chuck it in.
But I think the key is to do it with the different stakeholders, to bring them into it so that you're all going to achieve the same goal together, because that is how you ultimately build trust and establish, what is everyone's role in this? How are we going to come together as a team? Because you're not just working within your own direct team, you're working across a larger team to deliver something probably quite complex across many different stakeholders. And instead of kind of pulling teeth and kind of making them come to the sessions where you need to talk about the next stage of the journey, actually kind of come back to this and be like, well, we did this together.
They named the sprint, they're basically out like 5 names, they all voted on it, so they did get that buy-in to it as well, so, yeah.
It's an amazing power of naming things. I had a project a while back, in team, and it was Project Unicorn, because it's all about unicorn farming. But they all got into it, and I got every mugs, they're all Team Unicorn, and the cohesive identity of that can form. And they had serious discussions in the canteen about unicorn farming. Walking past, what on earth are you doing? And then sort of the room around it, unicorn farming. What's going on? What's this unicorns? You know, we built up that knowledge around the team, which is great.
And one of the things we do a lot with teams is we work towards building what we call a one team mentality, which is exactly what you're describing. So everybody had that one team, one unicorn mentality, if you like, but it's what bound them together. And so I think it's really important that we take the time to do this. Okay, final one, and this is one of my favorites, is the API rule. It's assume positive intent. So many times I see in times of transformation, people assume the worst when something comes up and they're not convinced that it's going to be on their side. So the default reaction is to be a bit below the line. But I think as leaders and teams, if we can adopt the API rule, then actually we can say, hang on a minute, I think there's something in this, you know, there's something we can learn from this. In adaptive leadership, it's called managing the holding environment. And I think that we need to do a really a better job at managing that holding environment. So that actually where you are seeing teams or you're seeing people starting to go a bit below the line, bring in the API, you know, whip it out and say, hey, how can we assume positive intent here? Because otherwise the alternative is blaming and shaming and gossiping. And actually that will do more to destabilize a team, unity and the team's resilience. So if we want to create cultures that are rooted in trust and psychological safety, then I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do things like use the API rule and take people on that journey with us, because that's fundamentally what we win over hearts and minds. Okay, so I just want to say that I know that sometimes focusing on soft skills can seem like it's a nice to have. It isn't. It's really fundamental. Teams that are resilient, adaptable, feel supported, they're 6 times more likely to report higher engagement and innovation. So there's a big business case for this. There's a 4-to-1 return on investment when it comes to resilience training. Companies that can make, I would say, good, fast decisions are 40% more likely to achieve double-digit revenue growth. And my favorite one is companies with empathetic leadership experience. They experience up to 50% lower attrition. And actually all the work that we do in organizations as well, we see on average, the teams that we coach, 23% reduction in turnover, which is huge. So, you know, turnover is a huge cost to businesses. So this stuff really works. They aren't nice to have. So I would say they are fundamentally the essential. So it's as important as the hard skills. So I'll just wrap up with some key learnings. If you take away nothing else from today's session, please remember resilience is a team sport. We are all fundamentally better together. So focusing on how you can help teams to develop the right kind of mindset, skill set, and culture tool set that actually enables them to thrive under pressure is really worth investing in. I would say focus on building these human skills, connection, alignment, cultures of trust. They are the things that really move the dial. And as EAs, I would say to all of you, not just governance architects, I think you're influencers, you're connectors, and actually you have the ability to help people see the bigger picture and change forward. So I think you're actually integral to all of this. So don't let them say that you're bureaucratic. You're fully change makers. And I would just leave you with this quote from the Greek poet Archelaus. He says, in times of pressure, we don't rise to the level of expectation, we sink to the level of our training. Train your people to be able to thrive in these really changing times so that they actually can deliver the change that you are all being asked to do in your organizations. If you want to get more of the worksheets and find out any more about our tools, do connect with me on LinkedIn. I know some of you already have, which I'm very grateful for. And I would love to hear from all of you. So thank you, everyone. I think we've got a bit of time.
Yeah, thank good. One thing I would add on your value, on the sort of the benefits of this, is attraction.
Attraction.
So we talk about retention, not because obviously retention, you generally need to fill the post, that comes a cost. But I've worked for companies that have a very empathetic leadership. It's not a soft place to work. You know, it's like you will get your job done between 9 and 5. But also, you'll be out building at 5 o'clock, especially if you're at 6, because go home and you've got a family. Shoot. And people will take that role because they're coming into a workplace where they're going to be supported, where they're going to be challenged but supported and get a chance to develop. And also a workplace that recognizes that they are not cogs in a machine, that they have a life, they have a family, they have a world outside work, and that's meant that they've got the low turnover.
Yeah.
You know, and people tend to arrive. I put a place an architect in there, and he's been there 10 years now. You know, and so I spoke to him the other day, and there's no intention of moving anywhere else. He's really happy with this because the environment allows him to do the big projects, let him get the skills, allows him to play. But also allows him to go home at 5 o'clock. He doesn't have a laptop because the company does not issue people laptops because they're not working inside there.
Where is this?
Come in, do your work, go away.
Because you can't work home balance.
Yeah, work-life balance, work-life balance are related. It's recognizing you're a human and you're not a slave.
Yeah.
You know?
You need to watch TV when you get home, yeah.
Or
And get your dinner.
play with your kids or go to a sports club
That's
or
right.
whatever else it is that makes you a rounded person.
I love that.
I haven't got statistics for that. There must be out there.
I'm sure there are. I'm going to look it up. I love that. Yeah. Thank you.
And I love the assumed positive intent.
Yeah. The
Um,
API rule, yeah, that's a favourite.
I always do that.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's so good.
I always do. I have it with my family because they're a very neurodiverse family. I would say to my kids, because my son, my youngest, is autism. He would come home and he would, do to his brothers what would happen to him. And I said, look, if we're at home, we always assume positive intent. We love each other, we're family. So we always assume that I have the best intentions with you. I might not always say nice things, but I'm always saying they come from a good place.
Yeah. I love that.
I had that just at work just a month ago, where the client's up against a deadline, and the more they prevaricate, the more tense the deadline becomes. And the comments are all around, why don't they just do X, Y, and Z? Why don't they get the finger out? Why don't they? And so they're not there to sabotage their own business. They have a reason behind their actions. Why have you not signed the statement of work? There's a reason. Let's go find out why they made that decision. Because it's not signing something is a conscious decision. And then you turned out, actually, here's the reasons why we have the whole things happening we didn't know about. And it's like, okay, now we understand why you've not signed. Here's how we can help you with the things that are stopping you and make it better. It's just that, these are small things that just make big little bits.
Not to go below the line.
Okay.
As you were saying that, I was just also thinking, yes, I would love to always assume positive intent,
But it also makes me think, am I not just leading myself into a false sense of security? Because a lot of the time people are a bit rude, they are a bit nasty, you know, environments are always not, you're not always in the safest environment. And maybe sometimes you're in an environment where you kind of have to be fighting, just like in your head, more than anything else. So yes, I do want to assume the positive.
Yeah,
but it's also-
The best revenge is not to be like them.
Yeah, well, exactly. I was just going to say exactly the same thing. I made a conscious choice at some point. So I always assume the best. And I will always give anybody a chance. And I once had somebody say to me, he says your biggest strength is the fact that your level of allowing people to redeem themselves, to let them get back into the fold and let them do what they need to do again. And I think that I'd rather get hurt than lose faith in humanity.
It changed how you react to that, I suppose. If, you know, I've used Colin's example is I haven't signed the thing. You can look at it as, oh, maybe they've got some problems we can help with, or they're just being really awkward. And if you think they're being really awkward, you might react against that and also being really awkward. But if you're thinking, oh, actually, there's some good reasons, let me go and talk to them, it changes my mindset. I know some people are just going to be arseholes, basically. Even how much you think that they're not being, they will be. But if you try and
cut you straight, cut you deep. And
but if you try and think of it positive in your own mind, at least coming back to you, you might react in a better way than.
I want to pick up on that because you raised a really good point. I think that in many organizations, one of the most important things we can recognize are the power dynamics. And that's something that I have on that Courageous Conversations worksheet. It's you have to fully understand the context of the environment you're operating in. And the power dynamics will actually determine how much of things actually get done, don't get done, who gets them done, who doesn't. And while I never advocate engaging in gossip and things like that, we have to fundamentally understand what are the conversations that are happening around us, who are the key players, who do we need to align ourselves with, and how can we get things done. So I think the API rule isn't carte blanche that if people are crappy to you, you're like, no. I think it's also about standing your ground where is appropriate that you can actually say things, whether it's directly to the person, whether it's back channeling, you know, seeking alignment in other ways. I think where the API rule can save you is that it stops it being personal to you. I know that some people will be doing it on purpose, but I would say the majority of the time it's because they're carrying something within themselves that is making them feel insecure, angry, power grabby, and that means that they may well put other people down along the way, and you might be in the firing. And I think the important thing is don't personalize it. And the second thing is you can try and understand that person, and I think the API rule gives you license to be able to do that. But I think that person is carrying these things, and that is why they're behaving in the way that they do. It doesn't excuse it, but I think it helps you to take away some of that sting and some of that hurt and betrayal, as you mentioned earlier in your presentation. So I think it can help.
Yeah.
But I hear you.
Might be that way tomorrow.
Try
the API.
Try, if somebody's nasty, try asking them, okay.
Yeah.
Because if someone's, people generally speaking aren't nasty people.
No.
There are some, but the vast majority of people we deal with are just humans trying to get through a day. And if somebody's snipping to me, generally speaking, there's a reason why they're doing that. Because of pressure, because they've just had a bad conversation, their wife's not happy, the dog's been sick this morning, whatever it is. There's some reason behind why they're saying a big step. And sometimes I've had conversations with them, go, I was like, it's okay, I'm comfortable. You know, take them to one side and have that chat, and you get them space, and then you find out what's actually bothering them.
Yeah.
That helps.
I say see the human behind the pain, because it's often pain. It's a projection of their pain on you, and you just might be the target. And if you can see the human behind it, you'll understand them and they'll understand themselves better. Recently, I was doing an offsite where I had this huge group of, so a lot of the work that we do is actually with leadership teams. So we had this global sales team, and they all sat there like a semicircle, and I'd kind of gone in and I'd done my introduction, told them about my journey, and it was all like inspiring and everything. And there was this one guy that was in the corner, and he sat there and he had his arms folded and his legs crossed. And I finished my introduction, he looked at me. With all due respect, and I know that the moment someone says that, there is no respect. There's no respect of what he's going to say next. So I thought, all right, brilliant. Yeah, and then he said, with all due respect, I don't have time for this. I've got targets to meet. So this is just, you know, kind of whatever. And you could just feel the energy in the room, just shh, like that. After I spent 20 minutes trying to like get everyone up. I thought, well, and I knew that everyone's eyes were on me, like, she's going to handle it.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, there's different ways I can handle this. And I looked at him and I smiled. And I was like, oh, the first shots have been fired straight to the chief heart officer's heart. Oh, I was like, you wound me with your words. And then even he had to smile at that point, and it kind of just diffused the tension. I gave him a bit of time, and then afterwards, I did one of my, what I call the famous Sharon Fuller side. Let's have a chat. He was still a bit snippy. Let's talk. I want to understand you. I can feel there's a lot going on here, and I can kind of sense there's got to be some frustration here. I really want to know what's going on. So, because you know what I said, you're not hurting me. I said, but you will be hurting your teammates because you're a leader in the room. They've all just looked at you and you've just done this. And I wouldn't want that to be the impression they have of you moving this offset. And he kind of calmed down. And it turned out that a lot of the frustration he had, it wasn't about me, and I knew it wasn't. It was about the company, and it was about what they were going through. He was angry. He felt that people weren't listening to him. And the moment we had that conversation, he calmed down. He actually turned out to be the best contributor in the whole day because he had the best insights into actually what were causing the problems in the organisation. So I might react that way. But it's the ingrained API rule in my mind. Like, you're not reacting to me really. You're reacting to the situation, which is exactly why you're having the offsite anyway, because it's a disunited team. So yeah, try it.
Yeah, I will.
Message me on LinkedIn and let me know how it goes.
I assume positive intent.
Yeah. Anyone else got anything that they want to share? Any questions? More chocolates?
Well, I was actually thinking back to probably my first second IT job, 2000, building a bank with so a traditional banking company, branding a bank. They wanted to build this new, around about 2000, they did. They wanted their online brand, they wanted an online bank, and I would say we're all kind of making up as we went along. So a lot of people who hadn't done this before were now doing it. And we made mistakes left, right, centre. But it was thinking back now, it was a very open culture because everyone was kind of making mistakes, but we sort of bombed our way through it. But we had a chief executive who, very charismatic figure, very clear where we were going. Everyone was bought into that vision, and we were going 100 miles an hour in that direction. Now, we may have been driving 100 miles an hour directly on the rocks, but we're going there, and we're going there fast. We were all full out behind this person, and that was great. And everybody was really motivated with this because everybody was on the same team, we had the same place, the same brand, the same t-shirt. And then he moved off to another role, and they brought in a more like grey manager.
Okay.
And the energy dropped, and it came to a stall, and then found that this whole ship was now in a fog, and no motor, and nobody quite knew where we were going. It ended up not going anywhere fast at all. We just kind of sat there, and all the energy and focus disappeared. And then people started going. So again, then the blame game started to come out. Why aren't we moving? Well, why aren't you rowing? It's like, well, where are we going to row to? It's like, it doesn't matter, just row. It's like, what do you mean it doesn't matter, just row? And people were kind of rowing against each other. I'm just watching the difference in 2 years. The team dynamics going from being really positive, really high performing. We're going to get this done. we'll make mistakes along the way, but we'll fix them. You know, we went live and we wouldn't print statements because we didn't need statements for 30 days after we went live. And even then, we hand typed them because there was like 30 a day new statements came down. So we just got an Excel spreadsheet and hand typed. And that was enough. And then about 3 months later, we eventually had a statement solution. And it was great. That sort of bumbling along and getting everything right. I said the new person came in and the whole ship just sank. And then my last project at that there was to figure out how do we shut this back down.
Oh my gosh.
So in 5 years, I went from bright new thing, Independence Day launching, everything else, to how do we shut this down?
That is the impact though, isn't it? Right? That leaders, teams, culture can have. It's no joke, it really was.
Great learning experience, but it's on reflection, you're like, oh, that's what was happening.
Yeah.
Do you have any? I suppose so. I often work across teams, so some of that stuff you were chatting about there, I'm definitely in a team which is spinning around at the moment. And probably got a lot of the things you mentioned, but I might be working in another team which is really positive. I think that's possibly how EAs, like certainly I've worked and other architects that work with me end up actually in 2 or 3 teams.
That's right, yeah.
One. How do you deal with it, like if you're in like a good team and you're in a bad team? Because don't want to carry the negative bit into the positive and that kind of thing. Is you got any kind of advice in that?
For you, how to navigate that or how to change that team?
I suppose maybe start with the navigation, then.
Okay.
But the changes like sort of introduce some of the sort of stuff that you've been talking about here, but part of navigating it from that point of view.
I would say start with the mindsets always, because that's the easiest thing I think for people to understand. And I think you can bring in things like above the line, below the line, into that tool, into that team that is struggling with it. Because I think that's a good way of kind of surfacing how people are feeling and what they're doing. I purposely talk about above the line, below the line in 2 parts, but the reality is it's actually in many parts. And I think that's kind of part of the discussion to have, because most of us are straddling the line. Sometimes we will be very firmly below, but I think most of the time we're straddling it, and no one lives above the line. Like that is literally impossible. It's against human nature. So I think it's about, you can start with things like that, but I think you'd have to get some buy-in from some key people in that team. So some kind of back channeling.
Yeah,
of alignment.
it's a bit weird because it's like it's been like it for quite a while now, and there's been moves to try and improve it, but it's not stuck yet.
Yeah.
So not really.
Not cracked
Not really cracked it, and not necessarily clear why it's continuing that way.
Is it? Do you think it's down to some of the makeup of that team? Are there particular things that you think are really causing it to not work?
Just asking me because I think there's some personalities in there which perhaps aren't brought into it, and that one about where you were saying we spiral around like the simple decisions, almost like the ones where it's obvious.
Yeah.
We've been in meetings where we talked about it, and then that's leaked over into the kind of more management reporting one, and then management have then lost confidence in what it is. And there's even been situations where I thought we'd got an agreement, and then we've gone into the next meeting and kind of fumbled through it. So it's definitely
it's a trust
there's
issue.
something not sticking in there.
Yeah, that's a trust issue.
Yeah.
There's like fundamental lack of trust between the team members, and that's then translating to the wider business, who are then thinking we're worried now about what this team's going to do. So yeah, I would definitely start with some mindset work, but I don't think you can really go in with the API rule there, because they're not in that space, so they're not ready for it. So I think you're going to have to start some beginning principles of what makes the team work together. What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve here? You might even want to try the magazine cover exercise. I don't know if they would be down for that, but
and so we've done some of that kind of goals. So really, I think we're all agreed around the goal. I think where the disagreement's coming about is how do we get there?
Yeah.
I think that's where the problems lie.
Maybe some working in the healthy disagreement space. I think it sounds like the right conversations are happening at the right time. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But I can talk to you some more.
Yeah, so it's a bit weird.
An alternative solution that one of my previous companies did, they basically fired all the architects.
Well, there you go.
They've done that before. To be honest, I like to think that because I've turned up, I've helped, but more from the point of added a bit of structure. I think, well, as architects, we often bring structure to a bit of chaos, and so I've certainly been helping in that space. And actually, you know, it really looks like this. But yeah.
Voice chest. It's just throwaway line.
Yeah.
We had, this is a bank. So after that, I tried to shut the other one down. I moved to another bank, another part of the same banking family, because they had decided that the people who were called architects, enterprise architects in their team weren't actually enterprise architects. You know, people who had knowledge that they wanted to keep in the firm, but they almost wanted to move out of the line of control to move them away from doing any damage. So they became this wee sort of talking shops. SMEs, oracles, people that you were required to consult and then ignore. Because if you hadn't consulted, they came across with you have to consult and ignore.
I know.
And so a new head of architecture came in, basically interviewed them all and said, well, none of you are architects. They weren't fired, they were redeployed elsewhere on the firm back to where actually they could be useful. And then they brought new architects in, and I was the first one they brought in. And the fun part there was I'm now joining a team who know the previous bank inside out. And I'm now an enterprise architect. There's nothing about this part of the bank. But I joined the same team as they're finding rules elsewhere. It's kind of, well, why are you here and we're not? And in fact, it came down to your mindset, skill set, and tool set. I was more above the line than they were, and they spent far too long discussing the obvious. You know, how many servers can dance ahead of a pin? It's like kind of.
I've got one about ownership. Actually, I've got two about ownership, and basically because of the work we're doing, we're generating new services in the company, and we define what they are, and it's clear who should own them, and the people who should own them just go, don't want it, and it's not that they don't recognise that it sits with them as well. They're more worried about, oh, I can't resource it, or I haven't got any money, and they're coming back to that, looking at all the negatives about saying, oh, I own that now. And so they reject it, and all it's doing is this decisions like going ding, 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 and slowly getting escalated up the company. And it's at the director level now. And they've reluctantly accepted ownership, but they still haven't fully mentally accepted.
A very long time ago, someone did an exercise in one of the companies to find out who should pay for systems and platforms. Very critical question, because there was no cross charge. And they brought to the graph, and they could see that a lot of the systems were under the CTO. Actually, they were not under the CTO, because the CTO did not officially own the system. It was on the business. So I think most of you probably know this story, but they decided to unplug a couple of systems and see who screams faster. And that's the easiest way to find out the business owner. Switch it off.
Yes.
The guy the person who shouts and cries more is a person who needs to find the funding.
Funding is a fascinating one. It does change behaviours. So one company I worked with, the funding model was they figured out how much the cost was, and they split it by headcount across departments. Nice and simple. But that meant that people would buy expensive products. People with small teams would buy expensive products. They only see a small uplift. Whereas people who had very large teams, the cheapest thing, they just find them to pay. So But then they then change the funding, change the model to say, well, you're in charge of that capability, let's say CAD design. You're in charge of CAD capability. And the money is coming, the bill is coming to you because you own that capability. Suddenly, people are looking at all the fancy, expensive products they've got, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that, massive rationalization driving down. Just because how the funding was allocated, shifted, changed other behaviors. And sorry, it's time for coffee.
Yeah. Actually, just like one last question. Is there a way to bring other people above the line, or is it a self-help thing? So if you're below the line, do you have to bring yourself, or can I actually bring somebody else above the line? Is there ways to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not at all just for yourself. I think it's one that actually you can use with other people. I think even just using the terminology of being above the line, below the line, and talking about that with people helps them to build awareness. Particularly, I've seen that happen with a lot of the teams that we coach. It then becomes the language that gets used in like a leadership team meeting, and suddenly the CEO is coming up to me and going, I was very above the line in that meeting. Like, okay, great.
It's actually very good. I use it with my sister, not the same one, but I think one of the things that it says below the line is about the, and I was telling you about this, that it's about negative thoughts, that we're predisposed with those thoughts. And my sister is like, from the same family, same background, same, quite a lot of trauma, but she's very much half full. Half empty. I'm very much half full, she's half empty. And we've had those discussions about how you talk to yourself. So you create motivation. So you create action. So you do something because you believe it needs to be done, and you actually make yourself believe. Nobody else makes you believe. Even so, 75% you say is what you tell yourself. Yeah. And it takes you, is it 4 times easier to tell yourself something negative to believe than it is something positive. So I think positive reinforcement from external is super powerful, super more powerful than what you tell yourself, because I can guarantee you all talk negatively to yourself. But if you talk to yourself 10 times a day positively, you will see positive.
This is what affirmations.
You believe yourself.
Yeah.
It's your inner voice. So your inner voice is negative, and it's so much more powerful to come from somebody else to tell you something else.
I was thinking more like if you're in like an architectural debate and somebody's clearly below the line with technology, you want to bring them above.
You want to whip out the video. Wait. You're like, hang on a second.
So words of affirmation, would that help?
I would drop to the open questions.
Yeah. Yes,
in that case, the open questions will help. I think you can agree with them about the bits you agree with them on. So yeah, I agree with that. That's definitely below the line. I also see above the line, just use the terminology. And
consciously think
well,
about
that's one thing, with kids, I need to work. It's like when they have a problem, just kind of agree with them, and empathize with them, and then it makes it much better rather than, oh no, it's going to be fine, everything's going to be all right.
Which is toxic positivity.
Yeah. You're just accepting where they're
like Colin said about the open questions. What I do is I reflect back to someone what I hear that they're feeling. So if in the way they're speaking, if I've identified that what it is frustration, I will say, I hear your frustration. And I was wondering if we could look at it like, and then ask an open question. So the what or the how. Why are you asking this? Why are you bringing this down? You don't say anything like that. But it's just a way to reflect back to them so that they feel heard, because they will be operating from some level of fear, and then helping them to move forward, because essentially what we're doing is guiding them through the it's the two-part. It's like you said about the naming of the projects, like Colin was saying about naming the unicorn. If you name someone's feeling that, they feel seen and heard, and that they feel better about it. And then you can offer the reframe how about if we look at it like this, or how about if you ask this, I may ask you this question, you're guiding them through it, and that then becomes then more natural. It becomes, you're not going to change them overnight, it's not up to you to change them, but it will help to move the conversation forward.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to deliver a session on customer first analytics. This session is focused primarily on how do you design dashboards from customers' needs and not the way generally people design dashboards, as in sort of like builders' ones. Before I start, I want to give a quick introduction about myself. I work as a senior analyst at Admiral Insurance. Before that, I worked for 5 years in an AI startup. Before that, I was working for Tableau. I did my master's at University of Bath and did my computer science engineering as my first degree. I have spoken at a lot of events, some of which you can see on the screen as well. I'm a very active public speaker. I mostly give talks around technology and like projects that I've created. And in my free time, I just love to travel, read, and hike. That's just really in a nutshell. So the agenda for today, I'm going to cover 5 main things. Firstly, the customer first mindset. Secondly, how do you translate whatever things you get into simplified business questions. Third, about dashboard designing, data visualization, and then lastly, how do you adopt feedback when you create any dashboard or any sort of analytics reports. So this is a very common scenario even in most of the businesses today. We deliver on like what we think is important, not what the stakeholders want. And most of the time, stakeholders are looking and thinking, how do we understand what the data is about? And essentially what happens is there is a gap between communication between what the business expects versus what developers or data analysts or data scientists create. And this largely happens because we build things thinking this is how it should work versus understanding who the user is. What is their mindset, why we're actually building those dashboards. So before starting anything, it's important to understand what is the purpose, why you're building something. So if you're creating a dashboard, there is a goal. What business questions you're trying to answer, what sort of KPIs, metrics people are trying to understand and interpret. What does the business really care about? A lot of times people skip the requirement analysis phase and they directly jump on building the dashboard, which is one of the major problems why you will see 1,000 dashboards in an organization, but very less of those things are actually being used. So to make that work, it's important to understand what's customer first analytics. It's an approach in which we prioritize the need, the preferences, and the experience of the customers. And the reason why it's beneficial is simply because of 4 main reasons. Every business cares about their customers. So it improves customer satisfaction and loyalty. Secondly, about the business decisions that we're trying to make or any kind of product development. Third is retention and reduction of churn, because if you are, for example, a B2B, it's important to retain your customers. It also shows poorly on businesses if they lose their customers. And then lastly, for any kind of competitive advantage, because if you don't have a deeper understanding of your customer base, that's a very big issue. So this approach is largely important for retaining customers and understanding what they need. If you are a business consulting, it's important to understand again what they need. If you are building a dashboard internally for a certain level of hierarchy, again, it's important to use simplified language. So there are multiple facets, basically multiple aspects to these things, which I'm going to discuss now. So the first thing is design for the business, not the builder. Builder means any developer, analyst, data scientist. Most of those people build for themselves. They think I will put this fancy chart and I will add a couple of labels and that's really the end of it. Or I will design it beautifully with like more sort of clear cut layout or colors. It doesn't work. So first is prioritize purpose over pixels. By that, I mean highlight the so what. Why do I care about this chart? Why do I care about this number? So you need to highlight what is the so what, make the visuals answer the question. So if somebody is asking why the customer churn is 20%, the visual should answer exactly why the 20% drop has occurred. Second is one message. A lot of people put too much content or too much stuff on one chart. Like they create a bar chart and they put a lot of information. Prioritize clarity. Clarity is where everything cuts out, and it's important to group those insights meaningfully. A lot of people will put 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I don't know how many charts on one single dashboard, which leads to a lot more problem. So make sure every single visualization that you make has one message. The third thing is users workflow. So this is because we want the data to be dynamic. We don't want to be dependent on some analyst or a developer or somebody to pull that number for us. So filters, timeframes, these need to be a part of building those dashboards. Timeframes, because a lot of people want to know latest data, up-to-date data. They want to know when the last time the refreshes happened. They want to know at what point in time this data was filtered. They want to know everything. So make sure those filters, those timeframes are actually a part of your dashboard. Fourth is narrative over noise. Add comparisons, month over month, year over year. What kind of value changes have happened over a course of time? Comments. For example, if there are any presumed assumptions, for example, this month we are expecting there will be a drop in data. So if there are like some things which all you already know about, please put them on the dashboards, any kind of flags. Do not be proactive about it, do not be reactive. Don't put those things much later on when you're building those reports. And then lastly, where this whole thing lies, build for trust. Because a lot of organizations, they have dashboards, but people don't really trust those dashboards, unfortunately, because the numbers are wrong. And that is the reason why trust is important. So add clear definitions, what does those numbers mean, and then disclaimer wherever needed. So for example, I have calculated this value using this assumption, or I know that this KPI is gonna be changing over the course of time because we're still building it. So wherever needed, make sure you're building trust with your stakeholders, with your customers, or whoever is your end user, because without that, you cannot succeed in the world of dashboards and data. So how do you translate business needs into KPIs? So there are these 6 main things. First thing is you have to have a really strong business acumen, which means you need to understand what the business is about. Are you a financial services company? Are you an insurance company? Are you a healthcare company? What is your business about? Then the business will give you something. For example, can you give me a data set? Can you give me a dashboard which shows the trend, for example, last 12 months? So basically they have given you a business problem. So you break down that into your success criteria. What does success look like for 6 months, 12 months, and so on? That is the second step. The third is identify the drivers. So if I am building a dashboard for sales, I care about my sales should grow in 6 months' time. So what things are driving those sales? Is it marketing? Is it having a new product? Is it because I've invested more revenue in some aspects of my business? So how do I identify those things? So the third step is about identifying those sort of drivers, the key levers basically, which are driving the business forward. Then when you have done that identification, you translate that into metrics, key performance indicator, and prioritize them. Firstly, not all data is important. So prioritization of which data is important for you is basically the key here. So most people put multiple KPIs. I think 3 to 5 KPIs are more than enough to indicate what are the key business levers where the data will come from and what will happen. So it's important to first decide which 4 or 5 things I will truly care about or the business will truly care about. Once you have identified, validate with the stakeholders. The people who are actually going to use it, they are the ones who need to say that, yes, this is what I also care about. So make sure when you are identifying these things, you validate at some point with the stakeholders, the users, the consumers, whoever they are, so that everybody is on the same page. Most people, they do the first 4 steps probably, and then they don't validate with somebody, and they keep on building and months pass by. So this is like you're skipping a step in the process, which leads to additional time in building the projects, additional time in building any kind of dashboard, also loss of trust, which is a bigger loss. And then finally, you might actually end up losing the client, whoever you're building it for. And once you have done the validation step, then you start reviewing and iterating. So if you look at your dashboard as a product, anything like that you create, and if you believe that it is good on day 1, then my question is like, what are you striving for? Your dashboard is great, right? But the data changes. New things keep on coming. Sometimes engineering teams keep on adding new things. Have you ever made an effort to think like, what has changed in my data that could have that could actually impact my dashboard? Nobody actually reviews the dashboard. They just build it and leave it on the side. So they keep on refreshing, but nobody actually knows like in the back end what is happening. So the last 2 steps are really important. Reviewing them and iterating them over the course of time. You don't have to do it every week. You don't have to do it in 2 weeks, but you have to do it every month. And you have to keep liaising with people who are actually building those things so you know where in what part of this pipeline things have changed. So this is what happens normally in most organizations, unfortunately, even today. The data team has supported and built 1,000 dashboards, but nobody ever looks at them. And if you check, if you use Power BI, if you use Looker or Tableau, all of them have in the backend options to see the usage, and you will see the usage has dropped. That is the problem. If your dashboard is truly valuable, why is nobody looking at it? So a lot of people build it, but this is unfortunately today the condition of most of the data teams. People don't really care about your data if it doesn't give them the right value. So before we go into how to design, 5 main reasons, there are actually many, but these are the 5 main reasons dashboards are not used across many organizations, even if they are built. Firstly, the culture of having ad hoc requests. People have a habit of dropping messages on Teams and thinking that the request will get resolved. Ad hoc requests consume a lot of time because they're simple and people think it will make the work faster. It doesn't. So first problem is ad hoc requests across the organization. Second is analysis paralysis. So we think there's too much data, so let's get that sorted one by one. And we never really end up building something concrete, which could actually solve a problem in one go. For example, if you're trying to ask somebody 5 main things every single time, wouldn't it be useful to make a dashboard out of it rather than spending 1 hour or 2 hours every day trying to just figure out a value? I've had seen people asking for similar numbers, I would say thrice from me in a week. And I think it would be worth having something more automated rather than every single time pulling that data from a SQL server. Third is complexity ruins the momentum. Yeah, this is a very, again, big problem. Like the data engineering part of the process is really, really complex. And sometimes writing bigger queries to fetch data actually increases the time, the lead time to give output. Dashboards can be automated if they are made rightly. So essentially, they could build your momentum for the business. But if you haven't done your due diligence in the start to understand what is needed, how it is needed, the complexity stays in the pipeline. Fourth is no real insights. So you've built a dashboard, there are 5 KPIs on the top, there are 4 or 5 charts at the bottom, but you have told this number has dropped, but why? The why is never answered. So there is no real insight in the data. Nobody knows the drop has happened, or the spike has happened, or the number has changed. So there is no real value there. And this all leads to the last step, as I said, lack of trust on the data that you have created. So once people start to doubt the kind of data you have placed on a spreadsheet, on a PowerPoint deck, on a dashboard, it's very hard to build that trust again. So it's important to make sure that these things do not happen and that your dashboards are actually being used. And to make sure that you have to make sure that these ad hoc requests, the analysis paralysis does not make a key part of your complete life cycle. So the first step of building a dashboard is a wireframe. A lot of people massively underrate. So this is one of the examples of a wireframe that I have created. And you can use multiple different tools in the market right now, but wireframing is one of the easiest. And I would say it's one of the best way to mock up a dashboard without actually investing a lot of time over it. Some people directly jump into building dashboard, which is not really effective simply because if you plan to change the layout, there's a lot more work involved. And it definitely helps BI teams or the stakeholders to plan the layout, discuss in advance the structure, the functionality, where the filters would be needed to ensure that it meets the user needs. And it is not a lot of work. And to do that, there are 2 types of tools right now. You can use a low fidelity tool like paper sketches or whiteboards or PowerPoint, or you can also use a high fidelity tool like Figma. Figma is extremely good. Adobe XD, Sketch, Tableau, Mockup, like there are tons. This is just made on an iPad screen probably. Like I have spent probably 5 minutes building this, but you can build something similar. And it doesn't take too much time to just give your vision, how it would actually look like in reality, and discuss with the key stakeholders. Once it is done, you can define a logical layout. So some people build dashboards in the way it is in the right, the orange color. Like they will put some KPIs on the right side, some will put in the top, bottom. There is no structure of it. A good dashboard has a logical flow. It tells a story. It tells where the key KPIs are there, where the trends are, what is it all about. If your front page or multiple pages of a report tell different metrics, it would confuse anybody who has no idea of what you are trying to create. So in the first step itself, try to design a logical layout, a layout which actually makes sense to a lot of business stakeholders and also to the people who are gonna interpret those dashboards and not just the ones who are actually building it. So to design dashboards, you can use Gestalt's design principles. Gestalt is basically a theory that explores how humans actually understand and perceive patterns. And it originated a long while back, and it actually means shape or form. So it has 5 main principles. Firstly, people see whole, not parts. So when you're designing a dashboard, they're not going to see 1 chart, 2 chart, or 3 KPI. They will see it as a whole. And if as a whole it doesn't make any sense, which means it doesn't tell a story, they don't really care about it. Second is visual proximity creates meaning, which means like all the things which are similar, they should be kept together. Like the slicers or the filters should be together, the KPIs should be together, any trends should be together, like things which are in the same category. If one part of your page is telling about sales, the sales should be together. And if one part is about revenue, the revenue bits should be together. Then third is consistency drives clarity. So this is again like a lot of people, they make tables, they make charts, and like they have different colors, designs. And I've seen like people putting trend lines and spark lines. So it's not needed. You need to make consistent layout across the board because consistency is important. It should look as a part of a whole thing, like as a part of a whole product. But if you put different designs on different pages, it doesn't look like a whole thing. So for example, you are from a sales team and you're from a revenue team, right? If your charts are like exactly, if your team's chart are different and her team's charts are completely different, it's almost difficult for anybody to interpret which team it belongs to. So try to keep consistency in the format of the way you design dashboard. Then fourth is simplicity aids comprehension. So if it's simple, like it's easy to comprehend and understand. A lot of people who are in business, they are not super accustomed to like using filters, slicers, or like seeing those fancy charts. If you keep it simple, it actually simplifies things for them because they're able to understand better. And then lastly, attention is guided by contrast. So use colors wisely. It doesn't mean that you have to put yellow and red and green. You have to choose colors wisely. A lot of businesses actually use their branding, proper branding on dashboards. Try to stick to that and use the same color palette because it helps to guide the user. If you use too much contrast, it looks like more colorful than actually meaningful. So these are small things, but a dashboard is a package of your design, your data, and what the story tells. It is not one single thing. So these are the 5 main things of the design principles. Actually, there are more, but these are 5 which I mostly use. The first is proximity. So proximity means everything which is similar grouped together, which is like your KPIs, your slicers, and then like any charts. Second is similarity, which means like all the things that are similar, like revenue KPIs, sales KPIs, they're together. So all the things that fall the similar category are put together on your dashboard. The third is continuity. So if you have seen Pinterest website, it's an example of continuity. All the tiles are like located in a vertical fashion and they're parallel. So continuity means like you make continuous lines because they're easier to understand and they're easier pattern to interpret by somebody. Then closure. So closure is like, so for example, if you have seen charts where people put backgrounds, like gray color background, or they will put some shaded background, it's not needed because humans basically fill the shape on their own. When we look at a chart, we know that it's going to be a trend line. We expect it's a square box with a trend line. We don't have to put colors in the background because it's additional work and it's not needed. It actually adds to the complexity of the way you have designed it. And then the last one is uniform connectedness. So if you have seen line charts, some people use line charts and they put only markers. There are no connected lines in between. So this principle is important because when you're building line charts, you have to connect the lines or the dots together because otherwise nobody can understand how the values have changed, how the variations are. And these principles actually are implemented in day-to-day world in dashboards, but most people don't know because they're a very key part of front-end design. But they make massive difference in the way your dashboard stays clean, consistent, and chaos-free. So how do you build the right visual? So you can see on the screen, there are 2 charts. 2 pie charts. Firstly, pie charts, generally people don't like it much, which I understand. But pie charts, I've seen the left one, which is marked as incorrect, where people use different colors. I think this is not the right way to create pie charts. And also, if you see that black line outside, it's unnecessary at all. Like, it's not needed. The right one is a lot more succinct, crisp, and it has the right contrast to differentiate multiple values. So pick the right chart or graph when you're building it. This is good for categorical data. It is not good for continuous data. Secondly, use proper labels and titles. So for example, you have 5 categories, give all the labels and titles wherever needed, make the wise use of colors and shapes, then get rid of any unwanted element. Like this black line outside pie chart is unnecessary. And then if you feel at some point that there is too much information in this, then always try to assess and refine the chart. So this is like a total table of how the charts are refined. anything which can be compared, for example, a bar chart, or anything which can be built over the course of time, basically falls over in the second category, data over time, which is like trend lines, area charts. Then if you're trying to make correlation, which is like comparing two variables, X and Y, you can use bubble charts, or you can use some sort of scatter graph. For distribution, histograms are really good. Most of the people use histogram for showing distribution, like peak hours over 24 days, or like certain amount of time, you can use histogram. Then part two whole donut chart are widely used for it. And then for ranking, a lot of people use different things, like some people use ribbon charts, but it depends on the kind of data you have. So this is like the key guide of how the right visuals can be chosen basically on the data that you have and what is the kind of metric you're trying to show. And this essentially makes it easier for anybody to know like what's the categorical data, what is continuous data. Categorical data is which shows different categories. Continuous data is over time, last 6 months, last 12 months, last 1 week. And to make sure that you're using the right visual, this you can find it anywhere. There are lots of information around right visuals on Google or like anywhere else. And it helps to make sure that the right chart is telling the right story. Now you have built a dashboard. So how do you implement feedback? So most people, they build like a level 1 dashboard first, and then they go to show it to somebody. And somebody will come and talk with them and you will explain them what you have created. So implementing feedback is a very crucial part because the stakeholders would want to tell you that this is not what I want, or this is probably needs to change. So firstly, treat your feedback as a product input. So look at your dashboard as a product. And as a product manager would think about a dashboard, think like that. Take it as a product input. So your stakeholders has said you that, probably if you had put this KPI, it might be more useful. So you might want to keep that and think, yeah, probably this is the right thing to think about. And keep that something on your backlog and discuss with them why do they think that this KPI is important. Then gather the feedback on early touch points. Don't wait till the last of the process, like in 3 months' time, that I'm gonna go and discuss. Keep it early. Try to discuss with them in the start of the process. This is how I've built my visual. This is how I look at my dashboard. Can you give me some thoughts? Then prioritize value versus effort. So when you get feedback, you will get a lot of things. So you have to also make sure that you use the time allocated for building those things wisely. So make sure what is the thing that they care most about. What is the thing that drives the maximum value for your business? So prioritize that first, and then see how much effort is involved. Then fourth is implementing iterative releases. Like you don't have to make changes in one go. You have to make sure the changes are done in step-by-step process. So you can go, for example, I will make 2 changes in this iteration, which will actually drive this much value. So implement in iterative releases. And then lastly, track adoption. So once those changes have been made, you can track how they're being used, what is the usage, people actively using it or not, are there any problems? So a framework which I generally use is at the bottom, feedback, then what action I've taken, what is the outcome. So for example, somebody said to me that there's a revenue drop. And so I added, for example, a year-over-year comparison chart to check the revenue drop. And if I see that my dashboard usage is increased, and I'm not getting too many clarifications from a lot of people about how it is interpreted, I would take it as a positive sign that it has worked. So you have to add multiple ways of analyzing your adoption rather than one single measure. All the BI tools right now, they have a usage mechanism, so which you can track usage every day, how many people have checked it, what times they checked it, what is the frequency of using it, which helps you to track the usage. If it's growing, then you're on the right path. So lastly, how do you measure the success of your dashboard? You can use surveys or feedback. Ask your audience, whoever that is, like what do they understand by the dashboard? Secondly, how much time they're spending on the dashboard? Are there any interactions, drill downs, click rates? What kind of questions the audience is asking? Are they asking intuitive questions, specific questions? And like that shows that they're actually curious about what you have created. They actually see value in it. Not having feedback is probably a bigger problem because that means they don't like what you have created at all. Third is action. So did your dashboard derive or like made any business decision or policy change? Like, for example, are there any recommendations done based on the data that you have created? Did your teams actually change the way they were interpreting or looking at data based on that? Then fourth is KPIs improvement, which is basically did the dashboard contribute to some sort of measurable improvement or ROI? And then lastly is sharing. So was a dashboard actually shared with multiple other teams or departments, which shows that it's actually a good dashboard because you wouldn't want to show something which is not good to somebody, right? You wouldn't recommend that thing. So it's important to make sure that some paradigms are created to understand if a dashboard actually works in the way it is designed to work. I have actually one more slide to show, but it's not a part of this deck, so I will show it separately. One second. So this is one of the dashboard design which I really like. So if you see the left one, it's sort of a wireframe. So this is like an executive KPI dashboard. So if you see the left side, they are basically filters. It's a bit blurred because it's a separate slide. In the left side, there are filters. On the top side, they're basically KPIs. And then here there is a chart and then some derived insights on this particular side of the box. And there's a line chart here, and then there's a detailed table here. So why is this dashboard successful? Because it's clean, crisp, and clear. So most people, their eyes travel in Z pattern. This is why I generally like Z or F design dashboard. So they see if the KPI is on the horizontal line first, and then they go by towards the left and towards the down. So I recommend either F layout, which is here, and then the Z layout essentially to build the dashboard, because that is the way most people try to read it. So first thing first is like, don't put too many filters, because a lot of people put like a whole lot of filters which don't work. Put 3 to 5 filters max, and mostly they're about dates or categories. Then on the top, you can also put some sort of notifications or alerts, basically what you are trying to show. Derived insights are mostly like, now you can use AI for a lot of derived insights, but if you want to just put specific stuff, for example, which is very much tied to your business. Like we are assuming that this data has been taken from, for example, this date range. Put those specific key pointers there. And for the detailed data, everybody I've worked with has always asked me detailed data, but I generally tell everybody to put it in the inside pages. Don't put on the front of the dashboard, because people are so used to Excel. They will always ask you for like some sort of like detailed data for months or years, or like, so try to put them on internal pages. You can implement drill down if you have Power BI, and Looker and Tableau had their own features. So you can use those features to essentially implement them. What it does for you is, it makes sure three things. Your dashboard stays consistent. It's not too cluttered for somebody to understand. And then last but not least, it covers all the main things. So basically, it's consistent across the board. And yeah, lastly, these are the key takeaways of the session. So always start with the user. Don't start with the builder. Ask them what they want. And who will use this dashboard? What are they trying to make? What is the business question it will answer? Secondly, design for action, don't be passive about it. Great dashboards actually influence decision. And I've seen that from my own eyes. If you build a great dashboard, you tell a right measure in the right way, they influence a lot of good decision. Then speak the user's language. No, do not use technical jargons, because nobody understands them. Try to use user's language, explain and simplify the business terms. Then emphasize the context. So context is where your data story comes into picture. Give your data meaning through the narratives that you're trying to build. And then lastly, data trustworthiness. To show that, use timestamps. When was the last time your data was updated? If your data is being under review, please put on the dashboard that it's under review, because people will assume this is the right data, and then they will make decisions on that data, and that will create problems. And then including the definition or notes, essentially like to make sure that somebody who is looking at the dashboard knows that what do you mean when you say sales drop, or what do you mean if you say deflection, because they don't know. So that is a language you have to use for people who are new to that. And yeah, and always remember, it's for people. It's for use for people. So try to always make it friendly, user friendly as much as possible. And yeah, keep evolving your dashboard. These are some of the resources. This book is really good, really good. Like if somebody wants to really master dashboard, I would recommend them to read it. Some resources about Gestalt's principle, and then how to design the dashboards are on the screen if you want to use them. And yeah, keep evolving your dashboards. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone?
I do have a question as to, it would be nice kind of like to understand how you link it to your underlying data layers and stuff. And, like, you know, this is about presenting it and talking it to the user, but also how do you validate it within like the bigger context, as in multiple dashboards with multiple users and
Okay, so if you have multiple dashboards and then you have multiple users, so I think there are a couple of caveats involved. First caveat I would say is like, is the source same? So for example, right now I'm working on a dashboard, right? And like my team is working on 4 other dashboards, but our data source is different. So the constraints are different for 4 of us, right? So that is the first caveat I would say you have to consider. Then when you do validation, so what is the meaning of that term? For example, you have a term deflection. What is the meaning of that term for you and the stakeholder? Are you calculating it in the same way? Because a lot of time that doesn't happen. And then the numbers deviate by 1-2% or 3-4% or more. So the way they have perceived versus you should be same.
But do you at this point I get the feeling it looks at a per user basis, or you know, I assume at some point you're looking more at like organizational wide design of the dashboards.
So this is about design of the dashboard, but you're talking about data, right? So
well, I'm talking about both, kind of like how do we put it in front of like a bigger if I had like you were talking about BI, so I usually represent that kind of like represents all the data in my organization. And it will serve multiple users. And I'm just trying to understand how you link it to, for instance, the architecture, reference modeling, and so on, and linking those dashboards through.
Yeah, okay. So I think firstly for the design perspective, so if you're a big org, like you are head of the org and then you have multiple teams underneath, like reporting to you, always like start by having, as I said, multiple wireframes and decide which layout you want to go with. When you have decided with that layout, obviously you will have to try it in the actual dashboard by implementing and looking at it. It will take some time. It's not going to happen like very fast, like most people imagine. Once you've implemented that, let's say you have 5 teams reporting to you, but you want to keep the layout slightly different, just to make sure that these teams are from the same category, but they represent something else, like A, B, C, and D, for example. So keep a standard layout based on your company's branding, whatever, like whichever branding they use, but try to like keep a separate logo for each, like make it like a product. So for example, your product is, I don't know, A, for example, an A product is about just, I don't know, motor insurance. But then you are like, for example, B, like a group B. B is also similar design, but B has a separate logo. It's called brand B, for example. Then brand B has the data and the layout similar, but it stands for something else. That's from the design perspective. You just have the top level same design, but just slightly differentiate the branding. So that when someone looks, they're thinking, oh, this is like from team A from that department. Or this is from team B from that department. Then for the data side of things, that's actually a lot more complicated because bigger organizations have a lot of data. Sometimes some data comes from different or multiple tables, or they have to like even actually join some tables which are coming from different sources. So for validation, like because the user, the person who is going to use a dashboard is your best point to contact, because they have a calculation they have already done for whom we have created a dashboard. But if, for example, you think that this is the way we should look at a metric, you should always discuss that thing firsthand. That, you know, okay, we understand this is how you calculate it, but this is also a way to calculate it. Discuss it out, because most of the time people haven't thought the way you have created a perspective. So they would like to know, like, why do you think a certain way? So if your why is clear, then they will obviously listen to you. But calculation of metrics and the data and the referential integrity at the back end, it largely depends, again, like how the business logic has worked out in terms of technicalities of the project. I hope that makes sense or simplifies that.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Experience told me that sometimes the users, they have unrealistic demands.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to something called a single version of the truth. And, they would ask for a definitive kind of number to be shown, like the value of a loan or something on the dashboard. But that was a very subjective thing. So as a dashboard designer,
I just need to get the, sorry, I'm listening.
Sorry.
No, I just need to get this.
Okay.
So you have to be very careful to not kind of go along with what they say and kind of give false information.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on that?
So obviously, right, like this is the truth. A lot of people will come to you with unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
And they will, if you ask for feedback, they might actually tell you 50 things to change versus one thing. So, like, as I said in one of my slides, you have to see where is the value. First thing, like what is the first thing that they actually care about, which drives the most value. If you think at some point that this is not how it should be created, you can always like keep your viewpoint on that and explain them why it is valid. Like it's more like you have to share your perspective with them as well, versus just like accepting it. I would say. Then if you have to drive those changes, you don't have to drive those changes all at once. You can really like compare your value versus like how much effort you need. If it's like simple and easy to get and like create, then you can always go for it. If it's not, then you can like put it in the backlog. You can do it later, but prioritize based on how much value it is for your business or whichever group, team, organization you're working for.
Yeah.
Yeah.